Hi, welcome back guys. This is your friend, the MHA What If with another fanfiction. This is the first part of What If Deku Confronted His Shadow? All credits for this video go to their respective authors, so please support the real author. Check out the link in the description for more details. Please give this video a like and subscribe to the channel if you want more videos like this. Now let's get into the fanfic. Edgar Allan Poe, The Raven. Fuck. Denki sprints down the halls of UA, narrowly missing crashing into another student. Sorry. Fuck, I'm going to be late. Shit. He turns the nearest corner in an attempt to avoid the now enraged kid, and pauses to catch his breath. Man, though, how the hell was I supposed to know that one fucking full-day class was supposed to be today? Maybe you should have checked your schedule, dumbass. Denki is going to ignore that particular voice in his head, for obvious reasons. Had his schedule even mentioned it? He checks, and oh yup, there it is, a full-day block labeled shadow training, whatever the hell that is, taking place in the guidance counselor's office, which is hopefully not too far from where he currently is. He starts running again, and ponders just what exactly shadow training is supposed to be. Class 1B would be taking it tomorrow, and from what Denki has heard, they're as clueless as he is to its supposed meaning. Denki is certain they'll find out after today, though, which is more than a little bit unfair for Class 1A. Oh, and there it is. The office's door isn't unlike most of the others in the school, save for the sign labeling it as the counselor's office. Underneath the sign, in smaller lettering, are the words, Judgment Hero Umbra. The door is ajar. As Denki approaches the low lighting of the office, he takes a moment to appreciate the room. Inside, oddly enough, is a collection of bean bags, chairs, couches, mats, and really any other soft surface Denki could bring to mind, as well as, for some reason, a bright yellow stuffed bear. An old, rabbit-eared television is in the corner, playing classical music of some sort. There's something warm about the room. It seems very welcoming and friendly, and maybe, Denki thinks, maybe spending a full day in this classroom won't be all that bad. He almost doesn't notice the woman standing there, leaning against the desk at the back wall. From a quick glance, Denki can tell that she's tall, with black hair that curls around her shoulders. Her costume covers most of her body in black and silver, and while the outfit seems rather tight, Denki has met enough pro heroes to know that there's probably enough space in there for her to move quickly when needed. Despite most of her flesh being covered, she's wearing fingerless gloves, which, for some reason, sticks with Denki. Does her quirk require physical contact or something? Maybe I should ask Midoriya. He probably knows everything about her already from the hero research he does. Himio Maki, at least he assumes, based on his schedule, smiles at the students as they walk into her classroom. Take a seat anywhere, she says. Her voice is high, almost delicate. Her smile is warm as she gestures around the room. Despite her friendly demeanor, Aizawa-sensei is glaring at her from where he's sitting on one of the couches, his legs thrown casually across Mike-sensei's lap, while the other man quietly converses with All Might, who's sitting next to them. They'd been avoiding implementing this class for years for some reason, despite the constant pushing of Maki and her dear friend Endeavor. But now that Endeavor is the #1 hero, they've had a harder time denying him any of his requests. Or, at least that's what he'd heard from Midoriya, who had pried the information from Todoroki. Truthfully, pride is probably too strong a word to use. It probably didn't take more than a please from Todoroki's crush to get him talking. Apparently, Class 1A will be the first to experience this, and as such, 3 of their teachers are being sent along as a safety measure. So, what exactly is this class about? Denki asks. There's a collection of bean bags in the corner, where Kirishima, Ashido, Siro, and a very displeased Bakugu have already gathered. He walks over to them and sprawls across Ashido and Siro's laps. He feels Ashido's hands in his hair, and while he can't see Siro, he knows that he's probably smiling. All ignore Bakugu's complaining that there's already too many people, move, and I was here first, assholes. Well, considering our teacher, I think I have an idea, Midoriya says. He's sitting on one of the couches along with Todoroki, Ida, Uraraka, and Azui. Kuda is sitting close to them, stuffed bear in his lap. Umbra's quirk is really amazing. She can pull people's consciousness into another dimension. When you appear in that dimension, your shadow manifests. Shadow? Ashido repeats, sounding a bit confused. The darkest parts of your personality. Ida speaks up. Essentially, they are the parts of yourself that you pretend doesn't exist. Very good, Ida. Umbra says. Quite the smart class this year. Now, you all talk amongst yourselves. Your teachers and I need to make sure everything is set and ready to go. As the last of the students filter in, Umbra walks over to the door and closes it with a resounding click. Then she struts over to the teachers, and they begin talking in hushed voices, too low for most to hear, but Denki is close enough for him to hear them discussing Mineta, who had caught the flu and is still recovering. He'll be taking the class with Class 1B tomorrow. It's a small victory mutually celebrated by anyone who's ever met him, unless they're in Class 1B. I bet Bakugu's shadow will be a pushover. Denki declares, snickering when said boy turns around to glare at him. I mean, he's already in touch with the bad parts of his personality, so what's it gonna do? Be slightly more angry? The entire beanbag group starts giggling. Bakugu turns toward Denki furiously, hands smoking, but his eyes linger on Kirishima, who's still shaking with laughter. After a moment, he looks away, rolling his eyes. Does that mean soy sauce faces is gonna be his secret bondage kink? He asks, choosing a less violent means of retaliation. The giggling breaks into full-blown laughter. Siro offers a small tay, in his own defense, then gives in and starts laughing too. Secret? Denki says. Siro's bondage kink is no secret, Bakugu? Siro flushes slightly, while Ashido snorts and swats Denki in the side. Looks like there's gonna be some pretty intense competition for title of edgiest Class 1A student, Azui says. Sure you're ready for it, Tokoyami? I'm confident he can out-edge his own shadow, Shuji says from where he's standing behind Tokoyami's chair. Tokoyami looks far too pleased at the vote of confidence. He tilts his head up, a familiar motion between the two of them. In response, one of Shuji's hands reached down to run through his feathers. God, I wish that were me, Denki thinks to himself as he watches them. Shoji's fingers have to feel nice, but on the other hand Tokoyami's feathers are probably really silky and pleasant to touch. It looks like a good deal to him no matter which perspective you see it from. Apparently Heaven wants to remind him to be thankful, because as he's thinking this Ashido's hands leave his head so she can wave them around as she speaks. Denki makes a soft whining noise and grabs her by the wrist, pulling one hand back down. Okay, geez. You're so needy, Ashido says, clearly more amused than annoyed. She buries the hand in his hair, gently scratching at his scalp. Denki hums contentedly and tunes back into his squad's conversation. I was training with Tetsu and Midoriya last night, Kirishima says, clearly talking to anyone interested in listening. Midoriya told us all that stuff about shadows, and Tetsu said I should just arm wrestle mine into submission. Maybe your shadow is just Tetsu with a really bad dye job, Siro suggests. And a cut-out Kirishima mask. Ashido shouts. One of her hands is gesturing wildly, while the other remains firmly in Denki's hair. Like the spy in Team Fortress 2? Siro asks. Yeah, exactly like that. All right, everybody. Maki calls. The students look up to watch as she, once again, struts to the center of the room. I think we've got everything just about figured out. We'll go one by one in a group, into your subconscious. Any questions before we begin? Midoriya raises his hand. I have a few questions about how your quirk works, actually. It's always been a subject of debate, but a lot of villains you've caught say it's really dangerous in the shadow realm. Are you sure this is safe? So cute. Don't worry, Midoriya, you're in good hands. Maki holds her hands out and walks to the far right corner of the room, where Ojiro and Hagakure are sitting. She hadn't actually answered Midoriya's question, Denki realizes faintly. Hold still, this'll hurt just a bit, she says, before reaching out and pinching both of them on the forehead, somehow managing to find Hagakure's on the first try. They fall asleep seconds later. She goes across the room doing this, occasionally having to pull taller students down to reach their foreheads. She reaches the bean bags last. For a moment something malevolent seems to gleam in Maki's eyes as she looks down on Denki. The pinch is quick and he barely feels it. The shadows around the room seem to grow larger, darker. He feels the world surrounding him melt away as a feeling similar to sleep overtakes him. There's a flicker of light and the feeling of something in his chest stirring. Then it's gone as the familiar sensation of waking up too early overcomes him. Denki wearily presses a hand to his chest on instinct, but nothing feels out of place. He takes a breath and opens his tired eyes. Everything is just as it was. Everyone is sitting in the guidance counselor's office, but the walls are painted orange instead of blue. Despite the light that the lamps shed, the room seems darker than it should be. A clock on the wall indicates that only a few seconds had passed. The TV in the corner has been turned off, making it hard not to notice the overwhelming quiet. Outside, the sky is pitch black. Denki sits up and notices Kirishima being the last to wake up. The only other notable difference is the absence of Umbra. "All right, everybody up," Aizawa-sensei says. He's standing at the door, arms crossed. "We only get out of here once you've either all confronted your shadows or we run out of time. Let's try and get it over with as quickly as possible." The students rise to their feet, still chatting and joking amongst themselves as they follow the teachers out of the room. Their bodies cast longer and darker shadows than what should have been possible, which some take as an invite to try their shadow puppet skills. After only a few minutes, everyone crowns Shuji as the king of making them. Having 6 arms seems to help, Denki muses. As they walk and joke around, they seem to feel at ease. There's an uneasiness in the air, though Denki can feel it. Everyone is on edge. Something is wrong with this place, the quiet halls of this not quite UA, but there's nothing they can do but pretend they don't notice. He had been trying to comfort himself with these suppositions, but he had found all in vain. All in vain, because death, in approaching him, had stalked with his black shadow before him and enveloped the victim. Edgar Allan Poe, The Telltale Heart. There are sounds, faint ones in the distance, like something made of metal is rattling. Maybe a pipe had come loose, but she doesn't hear any water or air leaking. There are louder, closer noises too, the breath of her classmates, their shoes on the concrete floor. Even when she isn't plugged in, Kyuka's hearing is far above that of an average person's. Yayorozu, walking next to her, seems particularly loud. The melodical tone of the other girl's breath seems to linger in Kyuka's ears and focus on something else. Come on, anything else. Her attention moves to Kaminari, walking in front of her with an arm thrown over Kirishima's shoulders. "Look, I'm just saying I don't see how you're not into girls," he was saying. "I get it, guys are super hot too, but like, Jiru? Oh man dash. Kaminari, I will actually kill you," she interrupts sharply, an empty threat, as both of them know. Kyuka wouldn't voluntarily hurt any of her classmates. Got it, Kaminari says. He puts his arms up in mock surrender, and Kyuka resists the urge to laugh. The moment his arms are off Kirishima, the tension in Bakugu's shoulders seems to ease ever so slightly. Kyuka rolls her eyes. Crushes look obvious after sticking your ear jack into the dorm wall enough times, as do her classmates' other desires. It's amazing the things you can learn when eavesdropping for blackmail. Yayorozu giggles softly at Kaminari's antics, and Kyuka's heart does that thing where it tries to squirm out of her chest. Well, time to repress that and never think about it again, she thinks immediately, as she's been telling herself for as long as she's known the other girl. As they make their way towards classroom 1A, the sound of rattling metal gets louder, and a soft, barely noticeable dripping sound starts. No one else seems to notice, so she chalks it up to her heightened sense of hearing. She can also very faintly hear a rapid clicking noise, and a soft rumbling, as if a train is running off in the distance. The walk to the classroom feels longer than it should have, the hallways seeming to stretch out more than possible, and as they approach it the noise of rattling metal and dripping liquid only gets louder and more unnerving. They turn the final corner. After months of taking this route to class, she had expected the hallway to look, well, normal. But the entire hallway is littered with bandages, clinging to every surface like a spiderweb. It doesn't even look possible to get the door open with wraps covering almost the entirety of the wall, like tape at a crime scene. A quick look at her fellow classmates lets her know they share her unease. Aizawa-sensei seems the most off-put by the scenario, given his clenched fists and thousand-yard stare. Everyone goes quiet either out of confusion or that same sense of uneasiness. The first to say anything is present Mike. He always seems to have something to say. Kyuka notes. Okay kids, due to, complications, we'll just have to reroute and group up in the courtyard. Don't worry, we'll look for your shadows from there, he declares in his usual loud manner. She could be imagining it, but she swears she sees Aizawa give Mike a thankful look. As the students make their way to the staircase, Midoriya speaks up. Sir, how exactly are we supposed to find our shadows? There's a moment of confused silence as the students realize slowly that they have no clue what they're doing. Umbra told me. You'll all be automatically lured towards your shadows, Aizawa says. On top of that, because of your youth your emotions are unstable. That will make your shadow seek you out. Bottom line, if we keep looking around it won't be long before we find at least one. With that everyone marched down the stairs, notably more quiet than before. Todoroki, Bakugo, and Midoriya are at the front with the teachers, as per usual. As they head down another flight of stairs in this maze of a school, Kyuka can't help but feel like she hears more feet moving across the ground than there should have been. Eventually, the seemingly random selection of directions leads them out to the front entrance. The sunlight seems dimmer, as if she's wearing sunglasses. It was still there, but even the sun can't chase all of the shadows away. Aizawa-sensei motions for the group to come outside after seeing them hesitate to step into the strange sunlight. As they filter out, Kyuka focuses on the noises she hears now that she's outside. The air alone is bursting with the song of flapping wings and surging wind. The train is nearby as well, but it's moving away fast. Had she another moment to listen, she might have heard it go off into the distance. Hey, look at this, Kirishima says, waving people over to the school wall he was standing by. When the majority of the group is surrounding him, he gestures toward a sizable hole in the wall. I think it leads back into the school, he says. There's a plate of metal that almost hid it away, with a handle on the side facing the hole. It's jammed into the wall, but could be moved if enough force is applied. Kinda looks like a door, Mike says. Some students nod their heads in agreement. Tsuyu makes her way towards the hole. I might be able to fit through, she says, looking towards Aizawa for approval. He thinks for a moment before grabbing hold of his scarf and tossing one end to Tsuyu. Tie that around your waist. If you run into anyone, or even just get a bad feeling, yank and I'll pull you back. Tsuyu nods and wraps the scarf around her waist, double knotting it before she pokes her head into the hole. After a moment, she crawls the rest of the way through. It looks like a kid's play area, she calls, her voice echoing from inside the wall. But half of the far wall has been demolished, with some train tracks leading out. Is no one in there? All Might asks. Nope. Then we shouldn't waste our time here. Come back out, Aizawa says. Alright. Can I take one of the figurines in here? The teachers look at each other for a moment, then Mike shrugs. Maybe it'll give us some hints about whose area it is, he suggests. Aizawa nods. Go ahead, Mike calls. A few seconds later, Tsuyu reemerges from the hole with a toy of a familiar figure clutched in one hand. Ah, that's a limited edition Fighting All Might doll, Midoriya exclaims. Tsuyu climbs the rest of the way out and offers him the toy. Midoriya takes it with reverent hands, looking it over eagerly. All Might himself looks torn between fatherly affection and bashfulness at the sight. I always wanted one of these, but they sold out so fast. Well, that answers the question of whose area it is, Siro says. Midoriya flushes but doesn't deny it. I'm glad he wasn't there, then, Tsuyu says. I'd rather not fight Midoriya in a small area where I couldn't dodge. His quirk probably wouldn't have worked like it normally does anyways, Aizawa says. What do you mean, it wouldn't work like normal? Yaoyorozu asks. The quirks of your shadow are usually should be inverse of your actual quirk, or at least a corrupted version of it. The only exception is when your quirk is deeply tied to the parts of yourself you suppress, All Might explains. For example, Siro's shadow might have scissors in his elbows instead of tape. Are you telling me Siro's shadow is the opposite of his weird bondage kink? Bakugo asks, barely holding back a smirk. Ah, Ashido says. I was looking forward to seeing that one. Siro groans and hides his flushed face in his hands. Ashido and Kaminari high-five behind his back. Midoriya seems to be staring at Todoroki as All Might explains the concept. It wasn't one of his usuals trying to look at your crush stares. There was concern in his eyes. Alright, I know young love is distracting but we should keep moving. Present Mike declares. Ashido's pink cheeks turn a few shades darker, and the group starts moving again. I still remember when Shoyuta and I dash. Hisashi, I don't care that this group of students realized we're dating. They don't need the details. Sorry, babe, Present Mike says, slipping his hand into Aizawa's. Kyuka can hear him grumbling, but can also tell he squeezes Mick's hand back. Midoriya yelps suddenly, and Aizawa jerks his hand free, turning to face the student with his eyes already glowing red. The temperature drops at least 20 degrees as Todoroki turns towards the boy as well. But Midoriya is just staring down at his hands. He opens his closed hand, and dust runs out between his fingers. The All Might doll is crumbling. The hell? Kirishima says. Is it because we've left the play area? Tsuyu ponders. Hard to tell, All Might says. The psyche can be a difficult thing to understand. We should have left it, Aizawa says. Midoriya, drop the rest. We don't know if it's normal dust. Midoriya, looking fairly disappointed, lets the rest of the doll fall out of his hand. It all turns to dust before it hits the ground. Midoriya's disappointment seems to incite a small, but noticeable frown on Todoroki. Kyuka wonders how long it'll be before one of those dolls shows up in Midoriya's room. They end up wandering off the school grounds and out towards the edge of the city. For the most part, everything seems normal. Kyuka supposes it makes sense. 19 shadows is hardly enough to populate an entire city. But it's that same lack of a population that makes her nerves stand on end. She's used to the city. She's used to the sound of cars moving, feet slamming on the ground, the buzz of people talking on their phones. But now all she can hear is a collection of noises that make no sense. The wind and the wings are still in the air, and on the ground there's so much more. She hears dried flowers being crushed, the soft clicking of chitin, and the sound of metal grinding against metal, just to name a few, but the most disturbing is the garbled, slimy noise of swallowing. It's repeating over and over, but it wouldn't be so bad if the group wasn't headed straight for it. But see, amid the mimic rout, a crawling shape intrude, a blood-red thing that writhes from out the scenic solitude. It writhes, with mortal pangs. The mimes become its food, and seraphs sob at vermin fangs. In human gore imbued, Edgar Allan Poe, the conqueror worm. Rikido watches over his classmates as they head through the city, further away from the school. They're still chattering to each other, even though the unnaturally empty city has clearly put yet another damper on the mood. He's walking next to Kuda, eyes on the other boy's hands as he rapidly signs his worries about the upcoming practical exam. It's a clear distraction method, but if it makes Kuda feel better, Rikido isn't going to stop him. If anything, it's helping him as well. The change is so gradual he doesn't notice it at first. It starts with an unusually colored stone here or there, white and glossy looking and slightly shimmering in the dull light. Then there are more and more until the entire path seems to be made of them. Nobody really notices how big the change is until the first peppermint appears, embedded in the middle of the path as if it's perfectly normal for a literal chunk of candy to be there. Aizawa reaches an arm out, stopping the procession. The class starts muttering to each other as they look down at the peppermint chunk. The teachers lean in close to each other, whispering for a few minutes before they look back up. Alright, we're gonna keep heading this way. Present Mike announces. Everyone stay together. The group begins moving again, cautious at first but slowly building up speed. The peppermint chunks become more frequent, and soon chocolate chips begin to appear in the walls. At some point, the buildings give up any semblance of normality and become structures made from cookies, frosting, and pie crust, some with large bites seemingly take out of them. The further they walk, the more certain Rikido becomes he can hear the sounds of someone messily eating not too far away. They walk a bit further before Jairu freezes. Aizawa-sensei, she says. What is it? I've been hearing a slurping sound for a while now, but it just stopped. Check, Aizawa-sensei says, gesturing to the wall. Jairu hastily sticks one ear jack into it. Yeah, she says after a moment. It stopped. But now there's some other sound. Gross. It's like a wet crunching sound, and slurping, not like before, but different. There's cracking and squelching. It sounds like something's being torn apart. It's probably changing shape, Aizawa mutters. Hizashi, will you explain? I don't feel like handling it. You got it, Mike says in his usual enthusiastic manner. Basically put, shadows have two forms. They have a true form, which is inhuman in appearance, and a form where they look pretty much just like their counterpart. The only way to tell a disguised shadow from a human is by a shadow's yellow eyes, but the most powerful shadows can also shapeshift into other forms for short periods of time, or even have multiple forms. They can disguise their eyes that way. That's why we're so serious about staying in a group, got it? In addition, phones don't work, so if we get separated it'll be hard to get back together. After a few minutes of walking, Aizawa stops them before an overpass sends them into a cave, eyes narrowed at a golden-colored mound of candy laying in the middle of the street. The semi-transparent blob feels out of place, and it was giving off a strange vibe. Rikidu startles at the sudden movement of the pile, and as if just awakening from slumber, the blob rises to its feet, revealing wait a sec, is that a gummy bear? Ashido asks. It does seem to be a gummy bear, Ida stated, accenting his words with gestures. But please remain careful, we don't know if it's dangerous. You're scared of a gummy bear? Bakugo asks, but he doesn't approach it either. It might be just a gummy bear, but it doesn't look quite right. Maybe it's the bits of pale discoloration around its mouth and paws, or the fact that its entire face seemed to be smooth and featureless. Rikidu's ears perk up when he hears Kuda muttering. Is he? The gummy bear turns to look at Kuda, and happily waddles over to him. Yep, Kuda is checking if he can use his quirk on it. The class practically dives out of the strange creature's way. The two talk for a minute, the teachers and students watching incredulously. Tentatively, Kuda reaches down to touch it. Soft, Kuda signs with his free hand. Probably inappropriate to say his friend's new ally looks pretty tasty up close. Yeah, Rikidu's gonna keep his mouth shut about that one. Even if he could smell the sugar from here. Ashido seems to take that as a sign that it's safe. She runs over, opens her arms wide, and wraps herself around the strange creature. It feels like a pillow, she squeals, which prompts Uraraka, Kirishima, and a few others to run over to feel it. Kuda looks uncomfortable at all the attention. Seeing this, Rikidu moves to put himself between Kuda and the rest of their classmates. Jairu offers Kuda an approving thumbs up before going back to checking the environment for sounds. After a moment, she turns and mutters something to the teachers. The teachers talk for a minute, and then Present Mike opens his mouth. Hey, pay attention, he shouts. He's not loud enough to make anyone's ears bleed, but it's enough to make half the people crowding around the bear yelp or fall over. Whatever we're headed towards, it's just over this hill. Everyone make extra sure to stick together. There are a few whines at being forced to leave the bear, and a few attempts to take it with them, but the class quickly reassembles and carries on. The road they're standing on is about to start going downhill. They cross the hill, and the class stumbles to a halt as they see what Jairu had found. It's a gingerbread house. It is an actual, honest-to-God, life-sized gingerbread house. It isn't some small cabin either, it's at least 3 stories tall, held together by what had to be literal buckets of icing. Are you fucking kidding me? Bakugo deadpants, summing up the class's feelings quite nicely. Why do the darkest corners of you people's minds involve a stupid all-might figure and a house from a literal goddamn fairy tale? Midoriya smiles sheepishly at the mention of the doll. Rikidu has known Bakugo long enough to read the subtext in this case being why haven't I gotten to fight something yet? They're probably about one misstep away from Bakugo just flat out blowing the entire area to tasty smithereens. Anyone recognize this area? Even vaguely? Aizawa asked, and it met with silence. No? Then the shadow just picked a location at random. According to Umbra, that means it'll chase us if we try to leave. He eyed the house suspiciously, as if it had offended his cat. Might as well deal with it here, I suppose, and maybe then we can all get on with our lives a bit faster. Todoroki, Midoriya, and Bakugo are already in the front, but the rest of the students begin to change formation as they move. They've done enough exercises as a class to know where everyone should be in a fight. Rikido moves towards the outer edges of the group on the right side, where his short range will be more effective. They all get into position as they proceed towards the house with caution. In their first semester they had fought actual villains when they invaded their school. They've realized how ugly a real fight could get. Present Mike is the first to reach the chocolate chip cookie door, but before he can knock or kick it down, it simply swings in. There's another pause and a few words hastily traded between the teachers, but soon Present Mike leads them inside. The group comes into a room that seems pristinely clean and lined with top-quality kitchen appliances. The door on the other side of the room looked like the exact same as the one they came in through, only with a folded piece of paper on it that said "For guests." After a minute or two of waiting to see if anything happened, All Might was the first to walk up to the note and open it. "It's a request for strawberry cake?" Umbra mentioned that shadows might have blockages in the way to people seeing their repressed feelings, but a few of the more curious students try to peer over his shoulder to confirm that yes, it is a request for some strawberry cake because apparently the shadow here is craving some. The note mentions that there's a recipe nearby, but it's just strawberry cake. How hard can it be to make one? Rikido had baked several with his grandmother when he was a kid learning how to bake. About a half hour later, everything is going wrong and the room smells strongly of something that was nearly indescribable, but most certainly not cake. At this point, some of the other students start poking around through the room and looking through the cupboards. A few were even trying to make their own cake from recipes they know in hopes that something would work. There had been a fight over ingredients, but they never seemed to run out. In addition to regular ingredients, there were miscellaneous things with titles of hopes, ambitions, and nightmares. Each of those seems to change their appearance slightly whenever Rikido looks away. Aoyama is trying to put those miscellaneous ones into the batter she was making, and Tokoyami is trying as well with the more dark-sounding ones. The eighth time's the charm. Rikido doesn't know what he's been doing wrong. He's been doing everything perfectly, with the cake batter perfectly smooth and creamy, but as soon as he pulls the cake out of the oven, it's blackened and disgusting. It doesn't make any sense. The same thing was happening to everyone else's cake too. A small peep from Hagakure in the corner draws him away from glaring at his latest attempt at making what should be a simply strawberry cake. She's shaking slightly and looking at a piece of paper that was hidden in one of the cupboards. She closes it up as quickly as possible and looks right at him. I think I found the recipe the note mentioned." She shoves it towards him, trying to avoid eye contact. He looked at the piece of paper that he now held in his hands. What could be in it that affected Hagakure so much? He opened it and nearly dropped it in shock. Recipe for strawberry cake. 1 broken heart. 2 scoops of hurt. A dash of salt. 5 cups of rage, seething. 1 heap of everyone's expectations. A teaspoon of honeyed lies. 3 tablespoons of tears. Mix the ingredients well in a bowl. All clumps should be gone, just like your potential to be involved in anything but violence. Bring to a boil over an open flame. Bake at 185 degrees Celsius. Serves 22 people. Rikido is shaking. This doesn't seem like just a matter of cake anymore. Hagakure speaks up suddenly, stammering slightly as she says, I only read the first 2 lines, but, well, even that felt too personal. The two of them prepare the cake together, Hagakure taking over when Rikido's hands are shaking too much to handle the ingredients. At the end of the process, the cake they make somehow comes out of the oven fully decorated, glistening and perfect, but no one wants to eat it. They've seen what went into it. The cake is placed on a small table in front of the door, and it swings open, large bits disappearing from the cake as if it was being consumed by something unseeable. The inside of the house is coated in half-eaten candy. Gumdrops with fistfuls of sugar taken out of them line the walls, which themselves are broken and gnawed on in places. The decorations might have seemed opulent and intricate if pieces were not torn off and scattered about, as if a picky child had come in and taken only the bits he liked of something. A large TV made of panes of sugar is gnawed on, bites taken out of the sides. Nothing seems to be safe from the hunger of the one who lives here, and thick gouges that were too large to be made by anything human lined the floor and walls, but even that isn't the most disturbing part, the oozing red is. From anywhere that has a piece torn off, a bite in it, or even snapped at some point, something red and viscous drips from it, forming large puddles on the floor. Kaminari turns to Shiro with a solemn expression on his face. I dare you to taste it. Aizawa stares at them out of the corner of his eye. The blank, disapproving look on his face was all that was needed for them to back down from the idea. As soon as all the students entered the room, a faint rumbling could be felt through the area, causing the chandelier that hung at the top of the room to shake violently and creak as if. Watch out! With a running dive, Rikudo tackles Hagakure out of the way, the chandelier crashing where they were not even moments ago. Hagakure shrieks in shock, but by the time Rikudo lets go of her, she's recovered and jumps back up to her feet. What the hell was that? Almost got yourself hurt doing that, a distorted voice says, echoing from somewhere deeper in the house. It doesn't sound like a single person, but rather two people speaking at the same time, with one voice being deeper than the other. It's echoing, like the person is standing in an empty auditorium and not some creepy house made of candy. It just sounds defective, misfigured. You really should be more careful, the awry voice speaks. Midoriya takes a step forward, trying to get in between the class and the unknown threat. No. Just stay there, I'll be out in a minute. I've made cookies for you all, they just need a minute more to cool. Aizawa gives Kaminari and Mina a look that says you better not do something as stupid as that. He ignores Mick's slightly tempted expression though. Hisashi's a genius, Aizawa had explained, the one time he agreed to talk about his relationship just so they'd shut up, but he's also curious in a way that's borderline stupid. So they wait, and then a chocolate door opens to admit a tall figure into the room. A soft murmur of surprise runs through the room, but as Rikudo looks on the shadow, he doesn't feel that same shock. He thinks a part of him knew what this place was long before they entered it. Hello, Rikudo, the figure says, his eyes glowing yellow as walks over to a small table to set the cookies down, sticky red syrup staining the area around his lips and his clothes. As you might have guessed, I am a part of you. Midoriya and All Might's heads bend together and they began talking rapidly. Meanwhile, Bakugu's hands begin to spark. No one attack, Aizawa says. Sadu, come here. Hesitantly, Rikudo moves forward. His classmates split apart to let him through, and then he's staring down this creature who isn't quite him. Shadow Rikudo seems unaffected by the gesture, instead smiling and gesturing to the cookies. Want one? Talk to it, Aizawa says, see if you can resolve this without a fight. But Midoriya and All Might are still muttering, Bakugu's palms are still making little pops, and neither of those things is a good sign. What do you want? He asks at length. To protect people. That's what I've always wanted, to keep people safe. The muttering increases in volume, and it's pounding against the inside of Rikudo's ears. But I don't deny that, you think. Why is my shadow focused on the safety of others if I've accepted my desire to protect as part of my nature? Do you want a cookie? No thanks. Shoot. Well, shadows can't lie. So I'll tell you. What if you hadn't been there when the chandelier fell? Do you think Hagakure's quirk would disappear when she died, and you'd get to see her corpse? Most of her body would be crushed, of course, but even if it was just a red pulp that's someone you knew, dead on the floor? Rikudo swallows back the nausea that image brings. Well, that's why I'm here, to help keep people safe. You won't always be there. Shadow Rikudo snaps, his voice almost like a snarl. You can't protect them, any of them. Not if you just let them wander around being self-centered idiots when they'd be so much safer just staying put. He slams his hand down on the cookie tray, but it doesn't break or go flying. The metal seems to shudder for a moment, but then, starting at the edges, flakes off into white-colored flakes. I can't make them do that. Rikudo protests. We all want to be heroes, I can't take their dreams away. I don't give a damn about their dreams. What about me, what about us? How will we feel if they die? Rikudo shakes his head, backing away. He's never thought that. He cares about them, he admires them all so much. He knows how valuable a dream is, he would never take it away. Lie to yourself all you want, the shadow says, its skin starting to bulge in places. It's like there's something under the skin, trying to rip itself free. But I don't have to listen to you anymore. I'm going to make sure everyone stays perfectly safe, permanently. Stop it, leave them alone. Rikido yells back. They have a right to follow their dreams, don't you remember? We have a dream to protect others. I remember. But I think our dream is more important than theirs. The shadow's voice had lost all semblance of humanity, becoming a garbled, growling sound. A bulge on its skin raced up its throat, as if something was about to get back. All Might shouts. He reaches out and pulls Rikido back towards the group as the creature convulses, struggles, and then a thing emerges from its mouth. The human skin dissolves into sugar as creature grows, slamming down on the ground and filling half the room. Don't worry, the shadow says, staring down on them all. It didn't look like it should be able to speak, let alone survive. Tendrils of gummy worms twisted to form into a mouth, lined with a countless number of teeth made of sharpened candy corn. The few places that flesh wasn't covered in colorful sugary candy, it looked diseased and rotted. Shards of rock candy jutted out at unnatural angles, some glistening with black, viscous-looking fluid. The back of the worm was dominated by straw-like features, twisted and curving into spiral-like shapes. Vaguely, a sickening slurping sound, as if someone was gasping for breath and only getting water instead, could be heard from them. In the middle of all of this, with the worm coiling almost protectively around it, was a sphere filled with what seemed like gumballs. I'm going to keep you all safe with me, whether you like it or not. The chocolate chip doors slam shut behind them. Keep the earth below my feet. For all my sweat, my blood runs weak. Let me learn from where I have been. Keep my eyes to serve, my hands to learn. Mumford & Sons, below my feet. The damn worm's faster than Katsuki expected. As soon as he hears the door click shut, he finds himself having to dive out of the way of an attack, and the creature tears through the floor like it's nothing as it continues down its path relentlessly. Where's it going? What's its plan? He thinks to himself, and the floor creaks and groans underneath them as the creature moves around below. Katsuki sees the floor crack under Ida's feet, and for a second the fucking bootleg Sonic stands paralyzed, but he's able to snap out of it in time to get away. The sounds of his engines mix with the rumbling of the floor, ringing in Katsuki's ears as the weird-ass fucking candy worm from hell blasts out of the floor and snaps its actual fucking jaws where Ida was 5 seconds ago. After this all is over, Katsuki is going to ask Sata how he's so fucked up that his shadow is like this. Raccoon Eyes throws a glob of acid at it that seems to splash off uselessly, and the one guy with the fucking tail tries to slap him with it. It seems to work. The worm recoils for an instant before changing targets, but Katsuki's keen eyes notice that something's wrong. Hey, monkey! Something happened to your fucking tail? Ojiro chances a look back at his extra limb, and sure enough, the area that had impacted the monster is turning white, grainy, and seemingly immovable. The grainy flesh crumbles off, leaving Ojiro bleeding slightly. The tails change, whatever the hell had happened to the tray, and this whole fucking area suddenly clicks in Katsuki's head. He can turn things into fucking sugar? Katsuki shouts, half in a temper and half trying to make sure the rest of the damn idiots can hear him so they know what the shadow's quirk is. Really? How the hell does that work? Guess we're not touching that thing then. The shadow beast thing, a gummy worm? Katsuki hasn't quite processed that yet, honest to fucking God roars, and dives back into the ground. That worm is probably going to keep on using the area as a way to pull off surprise attacks on them. Well, if he's going to use this place to hide, then it's probably best to destroy it. Darting over to where the ground is starting to crack, he lets loose with his quirk, sending sweet shrapnel in every direction and exposing the eldritch candy horror lurking underneath. It lets out pained cry, only for several higher-pitched wails to join it. The esophagi on its back starts to bulge and more fucking gummy worms come out of them, all of them with sharp white teeth and covered with viscous red slime. If Katsuki could use only a few words to describe these things, he'd call them the creepiest little fucks he'd ever seen, and in his book that fucking means something. The smaller worms dive into the ground too, only adding to the cacophony of vibrations around the group. His attack on the floor has begun to generate sweet-smelling smoke, and it's making it impossible to see shit. Katsuki finds himself dodging what looks like a chunk of weight. Is that the fucking roof? Katsuki definitely has some powerful attacks, but he didn't think that it would do that much damage to the building. A chunk of the stuff almost hits Bird Head, but 8 Arms catches it and hurls it at the worm in an attempt to hit it before it vanishes below ground again. Katsuki takes a moment to look around while the worm's distracted, waving smoke out of his face. Headphones has her ears plugged into the wall, presumably trying to locate the creature, but it seems like the vibrations coming from both the worm and the unstable structure are confusing her hearing. Rock Face is mumbling worse than fucking Deku, presumably trying to use his quirk on something. A few worms emerge from the ground and coil protectively around him, and judging by the relieved expression on his face, they probably wouldn't be attacking him anytime soon. A few of the tame ones are heading to All Might who, oh right. It isn't easy to just adjust to the fact that the previous number 1 hero is no longer capable of much real combat, especially when it's his F. Katsuki immediately dismisses this train of thought, turning his attention back to the fight at hand. No time for that now, does. He tears off pieces of the gumdrops that were lining the walls and shoves them over his hands, turning them into makeshift gloves. That way that fuck can't turn his fist to sugar. With a loud cry of "Tai!" he jumps into the hole and delivers a solid right hook to one of those tube things. The explosions bathe them both in fire, but Katsuki finds himself grinning. If this thing is entirely made of sugar, then that should definitely put something out of commission. And sure enough, the tubes on the back of the hell beast look even more twisted and warped than before, and when they bulge again in an attempt to generate more mini-worms, they burst, sending sugar and parts of gummy worms everywhere. It roars in pain and dives back down, the rumblings fading as if it's retreating. He looks up to see how the others are doing and frowns. There's thick black smoke everywhere from the burned sugar, and he can't see a damn thing. He uses a small explosion to propel himself out of the mess down there and takes a moment to assess the situation. And oh boy, is it a fucking situation. Long-range quirk users can't see because of the smoke, close-range ones can't fight because of the sugar, and Aizawa is fighting a losing battle with his eyes, which already look red and bloodshot with all of this goddamn smoke around. Deku seems to notice this too, and turns around to punch the wall. It crumbles like the literal fucking cookies it's made out of, and debris once again rain down on the rest of the group. While the debris is distracting, the fact that it lets out the goddamn smoke through the roof is a relief. It lets him see this whole mess. Jiru's screams cut off his train of thought as she sprints towards Yaoyorozu. Yaoyorozu's hands are clawing desperately at the candy-colored tendril that has wrapped itself around her neck, attempting to strangle her. Half the class rushes towards her as well to help like the damn reckless heroes that they're training to be, and that's what leaves them wide fucking open. He feels the vibrations, but it's too late to react by the time he actually registers what's going on. The monstrous shadow bursts out of the ground again, its candy spikes slashing Kuda across the legs, but that isn't its real target. That thing is headed straight for Kirishima. Katsuki is too far away, and can only watch in horror as that fuckbug surges up out of the ground, right behind his best fucking friend, and swallows him whole. Kirishima barely had time to turn around before he's gone. Katsuki hears screaming. Faintly, he recognizes it as his own. That doesn't matter. Nothing matters. Scratch that, one thing matters, and that's making sure that slinky-ass motherfucker dies. He doesn't care about the moment of shocked silence that passes, or the fact that the vibrations have dulled again. All that matters is making sure it's gone. One of the gummy things makes a pass, but he backhands it, palms sparking, tearing it into hundreds of sugary bits. Around him, most of the worms are being dealt with as well, either being torn apart or disposed of in some other way. He dully notices Siro taping a mass of gummies together. The rumblings intensify, and his palms spark slightly in preparation for what's to come. The damn worm comes out of the ground again, tearing its gumball-looking thing along with it, and Kirishima is in it. Kirishima is trapped in that fucking gumball machine, and judging by the slightly grainy state of his clothes and hair, he's being affected by the bastard's quirk. Mike shrieks at pitch high enough to break glass, but the ball's unaffected. It's probably made of melted sugar. Kirishima's alive, trying to break through the damn container, but Katsuki doesn't know for how long. He glances at Siro, Ashido, and Kaminari, and there's a moment of understanding between them as all four nod their heads. They're getting him out no matter what. Out of the corner of his eye, Katsuki sees Aizawa turn and stares the monster down, despite the leftover smoke. That should buy them some time at least. Yaoyorozu. Trap that fucking thing. Half and half, keep the worms off us. He can tell Yaoyorozu is making something out of herself, some kind of weird metallic net. She glances at Kaminari as she hurls it at the beast, trapping it for the moment. The Pikachu ripoff takes that as his cue to surround himself with electricity and punch that thing as hard as he can. Electricity crackles and spreads along the net. It almost looks like a bolt of lightning hits it, and suddenly everything is on fucking fire, starting at the point of Kaminari's impact and engulfing the creature's entire body in seconds. Sugar burns well. It looks like electricity is enough to set a reaction off. He can see Q pulling back Kaminari, who is letting out a faint, wailing noise. Half and half swaps over to ice to try and keep the fire from the students, but none of that matters. The worm is busy trying to put itself out. It's wide open. Katsuki runs forward as fast as he can, and letting off an explosion from his elbow, slams his fist into the gumball container Kirishima is trapped in. One hit doesn't do it, even with Kirishima punching it from the other side. So Katsuki uses his winning strategy, hitting it again. The muscles in his arms scream in protest from overusing his quirk, but he ignores it. He brings his fist down again and again and again. Something cracks, and the pain in his arm goes from an ache to screeching agony. He bites back a howl, there's no fucking time, swaps arms, and keeps going. Finally, the glass breaks. Katsuki reaches out his one good arm, and Kirishima grabs on and hastily pulls himself out. The flailing of the candy from hell isn't over yet though. A burning tendril of gummy worm almost hits him in the arm, but is deflected last moment by Kirishima, who gives him a pointy-toothed smile. He vaguely hears someone say, "Sa now," but to him it doesn't matter. Kirishima is alive, he's okay, and despite being surrounded all around by what many people would describe a burning hellscape, he's safe. Katsuki reaches up shakily to brush sugar off his face, to wipe away the remains of what just happened, and he immediately regrets it when he moves the wrong arm. Shit, that hurts a lot. Hey, are you okay? Kirishima doesn't miss his wince as he attempts to lift the arm, and the concern brimming in his eyes makes Katsuki want to look away, and oh, Kirishima's still holding his hand from when Katsuki pulled him out of the shadow. He really hopes he's not blushing. He knows that he's taking too long to respond to Kirishima's question, but he isn't sure he can form actual words right now. He opens his mouth and hopes something at least half-coherent comes out. Whatever Katsuki was going to say, he's not completely sure himself, is interrupted by a sudden yell from Satu, who punches the sugary beast through the wall, and the last of the candy house crumbles around them, revealing that at this point, literally everything is on fire. The worm starts to shrink, revealing a yellow-eyed Satu, injured and covered in black blood. But we could have protected them. They would have been safe. You could have just stayed here. I would have taken care of you. Satu steps up with an angry look in his eye. You almost killed Kirishima. Yaoyorozu and Kuda are hurt badly, and everyone else has at least a few scrapes. You've just hurt them. Shadow Satu recoils as if physically struck. I just wanted to protect them. It isn't my fault they got hurt. It isn't. Everything is fine. He sounds less sure of himself at the end. Look around you. Everything is literally on fire. This is the opposite of fine. Satu shouts, and Shadow Satu looks around, his eyes brimming with tears. I just wanted to protect them. Satu looks at his own shadow with what could best be described as pity. I do too. But the best way to do that isn't to fight with them. You're me. You should know this. The world around them begins to shift. The fires slowly die, and the walls begin to rebuild themselves. But they aren't made of candy this time. Just brick and mortar. With pictures of Class 1A appearing, as if they'd always been hanging there. Karaoke night, Satu and Kirishima's team selfie minutes before fighting Cementos. That one time Satu had managed to get everyone to sit down and eat sweets together. Why had Katsuki agreed to that again? Shadow Satu looks up with golden eyes. They don't look sickly or fearful now, but instead brighter and more sure of themselves. The other shadows are a lot stronger than me. Protect them for both of us. He smiles, and his body flakes off into golden dust, blown away by an unseen wind. Silence reigned for a moment, until Zero breaks it. Holy shit, I can't believe that Satu is into Vordash, he yelps as one of Aizawa's scarves slaps him across the face. Oh. You probably deserved that, didn't I? You absolutely fucking deserved that, Katsuki confirms. He makes another attempt at moving his injured arm. Still painful. Kirishima, standing next to him, looks about one rough shove from falling over. Injuries heal somewhat quicker here, so don't worry too much. All Might says, shuffling forward. But we should still take proper care. Young Bakugu, let me see your arm. I'm fine, pay attention to the guy who just got swallowed, he says. All Might just looks at him, and Katsuki ends up holding his arm out anyways. All Might gently runs a hand over it, checking the damage. Katsuki resists the urge to flinch when the pain flares up. Looks like you broke it? Fucking hell. We'll have to deal with that quickly. So, who else is never going to be able to look at gummy worms the same way again? Mina asks, but any responses are cut off by Aizawa's sharp voice. Have a fight that goes that poorly again and I'll expel the lot of you. Huh? But I thought it's Uraraka this time that Aizawa speaks over, and something about the way his voice shakes slightly doesn't seem quite right. What, you thought it went fine? People were greatly injured, and this is just the first fight. You heard what the other Sata said? Aizawa's shaking, Katsuki realizes. I'm not sure what Umbra's trying to achieve here besides ending up with 22 corpses. His eyes are locked onto Kirishima, who's brushing off bits of his former skin, and he hears Deku whisper a quiet "oh." Katsuki almost doesn't hear him, but he does, and it's enough for the pieces to click in his head. He isn't aware of everything that happened with Aizawa in USJ, he'd been too busy fending for himself, but he knew that he'd been severely injured in an attempt to protect Azui and Deku, and someone else. But Katsuki can't quite remember who, from a villain with a disintegration quirk based on physical contact. Which, honestly, sort of resembles this Satu's quirk, didn't it? Shit, no wonder he's freaking out like this. Really, though, now wasn't the fucking time to try and deal with their sensei's long-buried trauma. That would be better left in the hands of a therapist, a decent one, not their psychotic teacher. She only seems to be making it worse. Is she even qualified? Hey, don't you think you're being a little hasty? It's not often that present fucking Mike is the voice of reason, but as long as it's someone who Aizawa will listen to, Katsuki won't be picky. Calm down, Shoyuta. Just dash. He walks over to Aizawa slowly, like one would approach a particularly nervous cat, and when he's within arm's length one of Aizawa's arms snaps out and grabs present Mike by the wrist. That's all he allows himself, probably doesn't want to look weak in front of the class. Katsuki knows that feeling pretty well. The two of them stand there for a few minutes, Aizawa trying to compose himself and Mike muttering what must be reassurance, too low for Katsuki to hear. Not like he wants to, anyway. In the meantime, Satu, the real one, is rambling off apologies to anyone that will listen to him. My desire to keep people safe got everyone hurt. I knew that you could all take care of yourselves, but still, The kid looks like he's about to cry, and Katsuki's about 1 second from slamming him into the nearest wall when Kirishima interrupts his rambling. Hey, it's no big deal. He grins, and Katsuki is instantly focused on him. Really? Satu's still on the verge of tears, but at least he's quiet now, listening to Kirishima speak. Of course. Seems to me like your shadow tried to turn a respectable, manly trait into an excuse to fight us, yeah? Although, Kirishima furrows his brow slightly. Wait, what? I'm a little worried about what your shadow said, that thing about the next shadows being stronger? That could be a pain. Really, though, it seems like more fun and opportunity to Katsuki than a hindrance. If everyone has some strong-ass shadows, then he'll definitely get another chance to beat one into submission. He'd be lying if he said he isn't excited to find and fight his own shadow too. That will definitely be a hell of a battle. Katsuki ignores the feeling in the back of his mind that seems to think otherwise. Aizawa steps away from Mike then, seemingly recovered from whatever had come over him beforehand, and cocks his head towards the general direction of the exit. Come on, let's go. We've still got a class full of shadows to deal with. We don't have time to slack off now, And, well, there's something oddly normal about the way that the class clusters together, following Aizawa as he leads them out of the former death trap and out into the unknown. Nobody notices the shadow watching them from above, not like they expect anything more, anyways. Their golden eyes skim the class multiple times with little more than bored disinterest before finally landing on Katsuki. He seems awfully eager to fight more shadows, doesn't he? There's no one else here to hear them. I'll make sure that arrogance is dealt with, even if it means choking the life out of him myself. The shadow giggles at the thought. That doesn't matter now, of course. They'll have to deal with a few more shadows before anyone gets to me. Who knows? Maybe they'll be missing a person or 4 by that time. The shadow falls into silence for a few minutes, pondering what the group might look like after a few fights, before suddenly sitting up. Well, no time for that anyway. I should probably head back and just wait, I guess. The shadow doesn't seem very excited by this, but nonetheless picks themselves up off the ground, taking one last look at Class 1A. Hurry it up though. I hate it when I'm left waiting for too long. You got 2 black eyes from loving too hard. And a black car that matches your blackest soul. I wouldn't change you. Wouldn't ever try to make you leave, no. Panic. At the disco, LA devotee. Momo has spent a lot of time honing her quirk. Creating nearly anything from fat cells is incredibly useful with a creative and knowledgeable mind. She's learned her limits and how to go beyond them, but fat cells don't just reappear after you use them. Whatever was left after the fight has been used, making a surplus gauze for injured classmates. The brace Bakugo had needed was a little more complicated than most things she usually creates, but it hadn't been too much of a hassle, particularly with Zero helping out. The real problem is her throat. From the pain and blood she feels in her mouth, she assumes the likely outcome of the battle with Satu's shadow had been a fractured larynx. It should be nothing serious, but breathing might get difficult, although she feels that other people should be seen and treated first before her. If injuries heal as quickly here as All Might had said, there's no need to bother with medical attention. Kuta's legs are still in poor shape, so Momo sticks with him near the back of the group as they headed out. After a few seconds, Jairu appears next to them as well. How are you feeling? She murmurs. Momo tries to say something comforting, but all that comes out is a pained, gasping sound. She quiets to a whisper and tries again. It still hurts, but it's getting better. Her voice is still coarse, but at least it's comprehensible now. I'm glad. Jairu smiles softly, eyes layered with sympathy, and turns her attention to Kuta. How about you? I'm alright. Thanks to Yayorozu and Zero, Kuta signs. It's no big deal, Momo whispers. Yayorozu, you're amazing, Jairu says with a shake of her head, and Momo nearly trips over her own feet. Please tell me you mean that in a gay way, Momo can't help thinking. She looks at Jairu, but the other girl is busy listening for sounds around them. The tips of Jairu's ears are pink, but it isn't enough to convince Momo her hopes are correct. Jairu is just so genuine, so kind and funny that Momo can't imagine her returning her feelings. Feeling a blush color her face, Momo remembers singing duets with Jairu during karaoke night. They'd been quite the mismatched pair, Jairu's beautiful voice with Momo's complete inability to hold a tune. How are Kirishima and Bakugo doing? Momo eventually asks, deciding to change the topic. Even if Jairu had meant it the way Momo hoped, the comment is still inaccurate. She hadn't finished the thing off. That duty had gone to students far more capable than her. Better to just pretend she hadn't heard it. Well, Bakugo is angry his arm had the audacity to break, and that his boyfriend had the audacity to get eaten, Jairu remarks. Momo laughs, and she regrets it almost immediately. Her throat burns, and she struggles to get out her next words. They're not really dating, you know that, she whispers. They might not have noticed they are yet, Jairu replies. Either way, Kirishima seems to be holding up all right, though it's hard to know if that's genuine or not. Kirishima will be okay, Kuta signs. He's very strong. Yeah, he's pretty tough. Just like you too, Jairu says. I honestly can't believe you're still walking, Kuta. Kuta blushes and looks away. Kuta did wonderfully, but don't be too impressed by me, Momo says. I burned all my spare fat up, so I'm running on low fumes. She lifts one hand up, which is holding one of the emergency food packets she always keeps on her person. It'll be a bit before she's digested enough to start making things again. At least Kuda has the gummy bear from earlier, still waddling along next to them. It ended up rejoining them after they exited the gingerbread house. Despite not having any eyes, it seems to be looking at them with concern. Of course I'm impressed, I saw that net. It was huge. Zero was already taping it down. Zero is good, but there's no way he could have made that much tape that fast. Jairu nudges her in the shoulder. She coughs and looks down at the road. I think you're really cool, you know? Momo's heart speeds up, and she's distracted enough that when something suddenly pushes against her leg, she stumbles over her own feet and falls directly into Jairu's arms. There's a pause as they both seem to register what had just happened, and then Jairu's eyes widen. Kuda, she hisses, and Momo realizes it must have been the bear who pushed her. Sorry, Momo says, hastily moving to pull herself to her feet. She really hopes that Jairu doesn't notice the blush that's now covering her face, even though out of the corner of her she swears she sees Jairu blushing as well. As she's looking around trying to desperately avoid eye contact, she notices something different about the area around her. While it still looks sweet and sugary, it's starting to look more realistic, not just a stereotypical candy land, but more like the real world. Everything is still made of sugar, Momo realizes, but it seems more like reality. Either they're reaching the end of Sada's area, or the mysterious change that had happened to the gingerbread house is starting to affect the rest of the area. Maybe both? Momo's knowledge of this place is still sparse at best. She hates it, this place where the rules she's so carefully memorized no longer make sense. Despite everything being fairly naturally colored, a splash of color catches her attention. It was rather far away from anything else there, and looked completely out of place. It might have blended in with the candy some before, but it was standing out now. It looked as if someone took several bricks of bright colors and made them into a rough building. Train tracks lead out from either side. Swallowing her nerves, she taps Jairu on the shoulder and points the spot out. Jairu has to do a double take upon seeing the remaining brightly colored structure. Hey, I think there's another train station over there, she calls out. Aizawa's capture gear flares out at the news, and the other teachers look uncomfortable. Tsuyu, does that look like the train station you entered at the school? Tsuyu focuses on it, then nods. Faintly, Momo hears Present Mike curse under his breath. Shadows are supposed to only have one territory. For them to have multiple, they would probably have to be very powerful. All eyes turn towards Midoriya, and then back at the train station, whose large tracks that stretched into the distance seemed a lot more intimidating suddenly. Bakugo scowls. Where's Deku's shadow? I'm gonna fucking fight him next? No, you're not, Aizawa replies scathingly. Jairu, check for any sounds. Jairu nods and sticks one of her ear jacks into the wall, and there's a pause before she says flatly, nothing. An alarm goes off in Momo's head. Jairu's voice comes out perfectly steady, just like it normally does, but her eyes, they're blank, like when you pull someone's eyelid up when they're sleeping. Dazed and unfocused. It's nothing, she thinks to herself. None of the other students are reacting, and surely they would have noticed if something really was wrong. This place is just making her jumpy. They continue on back into the city, and eventually their little group of 3 falls behind again. Jairu's walking has become jilted, almost like a dog on 2 legs. Kuda is starting to look concerned as well. Then she stops moving altogether, and Momo and Kuda both stumble to a halt and turn to look at her. There's a moment where nothing happens before Jairu turns and silently walks away from the group. Momo and Kuda dive for her in unison, but her ear jacks jerk to life and one nearly gets Momo in the eye before she retreats. The blank expression in Jairu's eyes is all the more jarring. She should have listened to her instincts. Stupid, stupid, stupid. In their weakened states, both of them combined still won't be enough to take Jairu down. Momo tries to shout for help, but the volume is too much and all that comes out is a desperate gasp. Kuda opens his mouth again and again, but no sound fills the air. Jairu is turning around a street corner. Send your bear after the teachers, Momo says, piecing together a plan as quickly as she can manage. She can't let Jairu escape their line of sight, not after what Present Mike told them about Shadow's shapeshifting. She runs after Jairu, Kuda following as quickly as he can on his injured legs. True, she thinks. Please let whatever this is be temporary. Chasing down Jairu isn't all that hard. Had it not been for the fatigue and injuries they sustained earlier, they would have surely caught up by now. Instead, they're being led down a seemingly maze of darkened alleyways. It seems that I'm always chasing her in one way or another, and yet I can never reach out to her no matter how hard I try. She wants the throne. She wants the throne. She wants control. Kill the queen for the crown and the money. I guess princess wasn't enough. Hearts like doves, she's the queen of the clubs. She wants control. Kill the queen for the crown and the money. Stefan Jerzak, queen. Achiko had felt uneasy with the whole shadow experience from the very beginning. She'd held her doubt about the safety of this exercise since Umbra had explained the whole thing to the class. She'd been talking to Ida about the possible risks and liabilities that the class could entail, but the topic had been dropped quickly after the first fight as everyone was caught up in trying to help those who were injured. Kuda had gotten his legs messed up, Bakugu most likely had a broken arm, and Momo had tired herself out making supplies for the class even after being strangled. Ever since the fight, everyone has been trying to shake off the knowledge that there'd been several close calls. Achiko herself is trying to distract herself by chattering to Ida. He's been seeming a little off lately, and who can blame him, really? After seeing what Sada's shadow was like, everyone is nervous. Achiko's been fidgeting with the hem of her shirt for the past 15 minutes, trying to stay calm. She can do this. She's going to be a pro hero. She's one of the few people Bakugo I didn't bother to remember half the class's quirks Katsuki will spar with. She'd scored in the final 16 in the sports festival. Hell, she worked with Gunhead. She can totally do this. Okay, so maybe Achiko is kind of freaking out. She's not gonna let it keep her down though. She has to be there for her friends, so they'll all get through this okay. Now that she looks around, though, perhaps not everyone feels the same. Most of the class looks agitated, a few are lagging behind, and in fact, she can't even see some of them. Before she can worry too much, Aizawa speaks up. Where's Yayarozu, or Kuda and Jairu? The rest of the class looks around, but there's no trace of any of the three missing people. It's like they vanished. Achiko looks to Aizawa for further instructions, but before she can say anything, she notices the gummy bear that had been following Kuda tugging the teacher's pant leg in an effort to drag him somewhere. Aizawa is visibly deliberating the situation. It seems 3 of his students are missing and it's possible they're in a powerful shadow's territory. He takes a breath to compose himself before speaking up. Alright, you all know the procedure. Stay close and don't wander. We'll be following the bear in search of your lost classmates. It's likely they just fell behind from exhaustion, so keep your eyes open. If you see them, say something and don't go out on your own. We don't need anyone else getting lost. He speaks calmly, voice revealing none of the anxiety he must be feeling, but the small quivering of his hands betrays the stoic front he's putting up. Achiko says nothing, and everyone huddles together a bit closer, staying behind Aizawa as he follows the bear guiding him. The bear waddles right up to a locked gate, and Achiko watches as it paws at the 2 large plates of metal locked tight with chains, then begins to pound on the door. Through here? Aizawa-sensei asks, and it nods. Their teacher hefts his leg up and kicks at the lock, and the whole gate shakes. There's an awful groaning noise, and the gate falls over without preamble to reveal another gate. Oh, come on. Present Mike sighs. This gate, as opposed to being made of dented metal, looks like someone has welded countless steel pipes together. Where there's space between the pipes, there are chains keeping the thing shut and a massive lock in the center. In front of the gate is an old-fashioned weight scale that's at least 6 feet tall. 20 stones of various shapes, sizes, and value lay before it. Hanging from the gate is a sign bearing instructions. 1 stone is lighter than its fellows and contains a key. 19 stones weigh the same and contain toxic gas. You may use the scale only 3 times. That punishment is way more severe than Sada's. Deku mutters, and Achiko has to agree. Yayarozu could solve this, Todoroki says. He's shifting from foot to foot, clearly displeased with the obstacle. Well, she's not here, and once I find her she's dead, Aizawa replies. Hizashi, you got anything? Mike walks over and taps one of the rocks, a gleaming green gem with red lines like veins below the surface, with his foot. He looks the others over, humming softly. His eyes move to a semi-precious blue stone, then to a stunning red and white gem that Achiko knows must be priceless. Well, I know what these rocks represent, he says. And there's gotta be some kind of trick to the puzzle. If we waste even one of our chances to use the scale, we're probably screwed. No shit, Bakugo says, but he doesn't offer a solution either. Well, we could put half the stones on each side to determine which is heavier, but that means our final use of the scale would give us 2 or 3 stones to pick from and not a real answer. As opposed to Deku, who mutters when he's thinking, present Mike yells. Achiko puts her hands over her ears. Todoroki, Midoriya, and Ida pull closer to present Mike and begin offering suggestions. I've got it. Several students, including Achiko, look towards the source of the noise, which turns out to be Ishido. Just take some of the rocks off. Shut up, dumps, Bakugo says, looking more exasperated than mad. Actually, Mike says. He looks the puzzle over again, eyebrows raised in surprise. She's right. Come here, Ishido. Ishido all but skips over to present Mike. She's beaming as he divides the stones into groups of 7, 7, and 6. Okay, he says, turning to Aizawa and All Might. Double-check my work for me. I'm gonna put 7 rocks on each side. If one is lighter than the other side, we know the right rock is in that group, and if they're the same weight, then that means the lighter rock has to be one of the 6 not on the scale. That's genius. Achiko's eyes flicker between Ishido and present Mike as the teachers carefully stack 7 rocks onto each side on the scale. All Might lets go of the last stone and steps back. Achiko holds her breath as, for a moment, nothing happens. Then the scale groans and one side dips slightly lower than the other. Alright, look at that, listeners. Thinking outside the box is just as important as other types of intelligence. Present Mike says as he picks up the rocks from the lighter side and carefully sets them to the side. He uses his free hand to reach out and pat Ishido on the head before gesturing her back towards the group. Across from him, Aizawa picks up the rocks on the heavier side and puts them down with the 6 present Mike hadn't weighed. Stop preaching at the kids, Hizashi, Aizawa says, his shoulders hunched and his fingers clench at his side. That's All Might's job. He still sounds supremely angry, and Achiko is doing her best to stay out of his focus, as is most of the class. I'm teaching them valuable life lessons. Unlike the demon we call a guidance counselor, Mike mutters the last part, and Achiko decides to steer clear of him for a bit as well. Mike divides the lighter group of 7 into groups of 3, 3, and 1. And again, he says, easily picking up a group of 3 and setting them on the scale. Aizawa follows his example, taking the other group of 3 and placing them on the other side. Again, one side proves lighter than the other. Aizawa takes the other stones to add to the growing reject pile while Mike carefully picks up the 3 remaining stones. He sets a metallic blue rock to the side and looks at the other 2 stones, an orange gem with bursts of yellow beneath the surface and a regular, dusty rock, which seems dull and lifeless compared to the precious gems around it. He sets them on the scale, and Achiko nearly forgets how to breathe as they wait for it to activate. There's a groan, and the orange gem sinks lower than the rock. Ah yeah, present Mike says and snatches the rock up. Aizawa takes the orange gem and puts it in the pile. The scale tips forward and crashes into the ground. Present Mike looks at the rock in his hand, and although he's smiling, he's oddly quiet. All right, listeners. Make sure to stay back. That's right, Achiko thinks. If they somehow got the answer wrong, that rock is full of toxic gas. She winces at the thought, backing up instinctively. Give me the rock, Zashi, I'll break it, Aizawa says, holding a hand out. Present Mike looks at him, and they seem to have a silent conversation for a few moments before Aizawa shrugs, looking resigned, though he doesn't leave present Mike's side as he lifts the rock over his head and slams it down on the ground. There's no hiss of gas. After a moment, present Mike leans down and picks up the 2 broken halves of the rock. Oh wow, Deku says softly, watching their teacher hold up the rock for them to see. It's full of gems. Most are pink, but there are shades of green and red as well. A glossy silver key rests between 2 particularly large gems. Aizawa picks it out and unlocks the gate. It looks like a construction zone, and the bear turns to the right and leads them towards a tunnel that seems to lead out of the area, a decent distance away. As they move through, it seems safe enough. Something about the area puts Achiko on edge, though. She can't put her finger on it, but it's like someone is looking over shoulder, silently judging every move she makes. It feels like she might have seen this place once before, but no matter what she does, she just can't recall where. She's beginning to feel like she's being watched from afar. Every attempt she makes to brush it off only makes the chill down her spine worse, and eventually her discomfort got bad enough someone noticed. "Are you all right, Uraraka?" It was Tsuyu, because why wouldn't it be this beautiful frog? "Fine. I'm fine," Achiko says. Tsuyu gives her a look that says she doesn't believe a word coming out of her mouth. "It's just, this place is freaking me out for some reason. I'm sure it's nothing." "You should trust your instincts more," Tsuyu says. "You might want to tell the teachers." "I don't want to distract them, Uraraka," Tsuyu says, and there's something about the way that she says Achiko's name that makes her jaw slam shut. "I trust you, and you should trust yourself too. If this place is making you nervous, there's probably a reason." Bless Tsuyu, honestly, she can't help thinking. "All right, let's tell them, then," Achiko says. Tsuyu smiles and takes her hand. "Oh geez, don't start blushing, keep it together," and pulls her forward to try and catch up. Aizawa and Present Mike are already halfway through the tunnel at the head of the group. There's some space between them and the next group, probably because Aizawa still looks like he's ready to kill the next person who comes close to him. "Look out!" Deku suddenly yells, but by then it's too late. Only once he screams does Achiko notice the tall figure standing at the other end of the tunnel. A pair of golden eyes flash, and a laugh echoes, distorted even further by the tunnel. The shadow presses a hand to the wall, and all around them the tunnel begins to fall apart. Aizawa grabs Present Mike and they dive out of the way, towards the far end of the tunnel, but everyone else stumbles back. There's no time to do anything about it. The debris falls, and the two teachers and the bear leading them are separated. They're on the other side with a shadow. Who's? Achiko doesn't know, someone who wanted to handicap the class. "Uraraka, can you get the debris out of the way?" All Might asks. Achiko jerks at being addressed directly by him, but nods and walks over to the cave-in. Only, it wasn't a pile of rocks that greeted her. It was dust. It was rock and mortar and everything else in the tunnel, reduced to nothing but tiny pieces of material. "I can't," she says, voice shaking. "It's all particles, I can't get all 5 of my fingers on any of them." Their teachers were trapped on the other side of this wall with a shadow who could apparently dissolve things, and she couldn't do anything about it. "It's all right," All Might says. "We'll work as a group, this shouldn't take long." The shadow's voice feels right next to Achiko as it laughs. "Oh." Achiko freezes in fear, because the voice sounds like two speaking at once, same as Sada's shadow had. "Look at that, your stupid little quirk is useless here." Go figure. Achiko feels like she's swallowed a mouthful of crushed ice, and it's now sinking into her stomach without losing any of its frost. "Please no, don't tell me I was right, not now." She hears a muffled voice from the other side of the tunnel, silenced partially by the dust and the shock of knowing. "Go. We'll have to meet up later. Try and find the others before a shadow does," All Might yells. Then he returns his attention to the group. "Everyone, get ready for a fight." There's an ugly cackling, tinged with a mechanical pitch Achiko knows well. Whoever it is, they're likely speaking through a megaphone. The class backs out of the tunnel and looks up. The construction area is dominated by what seems to be a skyscraper in progress, but right now all that's been built is the initial metal outline. At least 5 stories up is a figure, sitting on one of the steel girders, her legs kicking the air almost childishly. It's hard to see the details from so far away, but Achiko can make out a business suit, soft brown hair, and a red and white megaphone. But she doesn't need to see the details, not really. She knows that voice, and now that she thinks about it again, she knows this place too. This was a part of the mall her father had helped to build, the first construction site he let her visit as a child. It was supposed to be the company's big break. In the end, bigger companies had come in with their lawyers and shoved her father out. He did the work, he made the investments, Yet in the end he was left with barely enough to cover what he'd spent. Yep, the voice says. This is it. This is the place that taught you the truth. Achiko slams her hands over her ears and shuts her eyes, but it can't drown out her shadow's voice, can't scrape away the sight of her own self sitting upon the very site that crushed all her hopes for the future. People aren't all born equal. Some are born into wealth, or born geniuses, or born with quirks that let them blow half a ton of rocks to kingdom fucking come. Almost imperceptibly, Bakugo flinches, but he doesn't say anything, at least he's showing her that decency. But you, oh sweet little Achiko, you try so hard. And for what? To get beaten like it's nothing? To be considered, what's the word? Delicate by Kaminari and his group of shits? Achiko can feel eyes on her, everyone's eyes on her. Tsuyu reaches a hand out and places it gently on her shoulder, but Achiko shakes her head and stumbles back. Please, don't. Her voice is shaking, her thoughts stuttering and her mind coming to a screeching halt. She can feel tears welling up, and it's not because of what her shadow has said, it's because she's starting to realize what it's going to say next. Bakugo, Todoroki, even Ida and Midoriya. They've never had to put in as much effort as you, just to get a fraction of the recognition. No. She can feel her classmates' worried glances and stares. They don't deserve to hear this, to hear these awful things. Wouldn't it be so much easier? No, 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 no. Even from where she is on the ground, she can see the wicked smile on her shadow's face, its yellow eyes glaring at her accusingly. If they all just disappeared? Shut up. There's laughter from far above them. Achiko's choked sobs echo through the open air as her classmates watch in silence. It's such an awful image, one that she's seen in her head before. Her friends, gone. Her top of the class. Wanted by every hero for an internship. But every time she'd thought it, acid had risen up in her throat. She doesn't want them gone, not really. She loves them. She wants them all to succeed. At least, she'd thought she wanted that. Tsuyu is the first to move yet again. She gently reaches a hand out, and Achiko doesn't have it in her to run away this time. She lets Tsuyu pull her into a hug, listening to her voice. It's okay, Uraraka. She's just a part of you, not all of you. We know that. We've got to get her down from there, Deku says. His eyes are still blown wide with shock, but he's working through it. Her quirk probably has something to do with gravity, and with all that stuff in the air we're at a huge disadvantage. He was right. The construction zone is full of cranes holding materials up at strange and seemingly impossible angles. The steel beams that make up the framework of the site seem to stretch farther than the eye can see, bending and twisting as they move skywards. Barbed wire wraps around some of the columns, and broken shards of metal pierce through supports, buckling them. Things that might have been sold in the department store littered the ground like a carpet, stuffed dolls and broken televisions mixing freely with shirts and expensive dinnerware. The entire structure looks one wrong move away from completely collapsing. By this point Achiko's shadow is leisurely strolling on one of the cranes above, twirling the megaphone in her hand. She places her hand on a rope connected to the claw and suddenly Deku is yelling again. Everyone move! Shiro, Ida, and Tsuyu yank their less mobile classmates out of the way as the rope snaps, sending at least 2 tons of metal to the ground. From above, Achiko can hear the vicious mockery of the shadow as she watches them scramble. Oh, be careful down there, she crows. I sure wouldn't want you to get smashed to tiny pieces. I'd rather tear you apart myself. Uraraka, get me within range, Tokoyami says, and Achiko swallows her emotions. She has to be strong now, for everyone's sake. Tokoyami holds out a hand, she slaps it, and then he's rising into the air. That's not gonna work, the shadow says as Tokoyami rises to float even with her. Dark shadow flies at her, but she dodges easily and runs along the crane back towards the metal girders. Quickly running her hand along the structure beneath her, she grabs onto a higher bar before the ones below her begin to fall with deadly amounts of force. Everyone scrambles away from the falling metal beams as Tokoyami is brought back down. She increases gravity, Todoroki notes. Yeah, no shit. Bakugo snaps. He jumps, and using explosions from his good hand as a booster, he manages to land on a lower girder. A massive series of walls made from ice rise into the air, accompanied by a low-set side wall to help others balance on the slippery surface. Some of the students pull themselves up while others take what's functionally an ice staircase. Achiko decides to avoid overworking her quirk so early in the fight and takes the stairs. As she runs up, she notes Tsuyu has left a still short-circuited Kaminari under the building's base, where nothing should fall on him. All Might, on the other hand, is taking the stairs to keep a better eye on them. "Think you can catch me?" the shadow asks. "All right, let's play." She jumps into the air, and the girders above her seem to bend to accommodate her will. They lower enough for her to grab hold, then rise to their original position as she clambers up. Achiko ignores the feeling of despair that brings. How will they catch her if she can control the whole area? Todoroki scowls and slams his foot down, and a pillar of ice shoots up from his right side, climbing up 5 floors until it reaches the shadows. She just laughs and keeps climbing. Deku mutters something to Todoroki, and he nods before creating 2 more pillars. Then Todoroki starts to climb up. The ice isn't smooth, but instead covered in jagged edges that will make it an easy climb for one as athletic students. On top of that, as Todoroki moves, one of his hands catches on fire. It digs into the ice, creating small pockmarks that make climbing even easier. All Might stays a couple floors behind them as they climb, in range to give advice but not so close he could get hurt. The ice is cold but she carries on, up and up and up. How tall is this place? She knows it seemed smaller from the ground. High above them, the shadow speaks. "Ah, is it hard to reach me? I assure you, I know the feeling. But why did you tell everyone? Couldn't you have just told me?" "I did it because you wanted to," the shadow says, and her voice is almost soft. Achiko jolts, but it makes sense, really. This shadow is a part of her. Of course she knows what Achiko is thinking. "Achiko, deep down, you want them to know, don't you? You want to be seen as a competitor, as someone who can't just be overwhelmed in shows of force. Maybe if they know what I'm capable of, they'll acknowledge what you can do too." There's a snarl, as if the shadow is disgusted by her own motives. "Of course," she says, and her voice has switched back to nasty, "they'll all acknowledge your strength once you're the strongest student left in this damn class." Her voice takes on a mocking tone. "Oh, teachers, it was so terrible. Everyone died and I couldn't save them. It's such a shame that I'm the only one left, and the strongest student remaining." With another toxic, grating cackle, Achiko's shadow returns to climbing. They make it, and it takes ages, but they make it to the top. Achiko's shadow is standing on the edge of one of the girders, laughing as she stares down at the world below. Tsuyu slips a hand into Achiko's, trying to keep her steady as she finally gets a close-up look at this girl who's her but more angry, more vicious. "Hey, Deku," the shadow shouts over the wind, which is roaring so far up. "Do you know what it feels like? To be so close, yet so far away from what you want most." "Yes." Deku looks down at his feet, and there's something saddening in his tone that makes Achiko trust the words. "How about falling?" "About failing? I remember during the entrance exam, how you went crashing down. You saved me, Uraraka. I don't know if I would have even survived that fall." "Yeah, Deku, you're falling. You and all the other top students. But I'm not." She takes a step forward, off girders and into the open, black air. Someone screams, and Achiko faintly recognizes it as her own voice. Tsuyu tightens her grip on Achiko's hand, and several students instinctively reach out to save her, but the shadow doesn't fall. She flies. "Gone my one chance to shine. The friends I called mine. The girl the world will never see. Bring it on. The musical, Bring It On." Hanta finds himself taking a step back at the sight of Uraraka's shadow as it flies up, its size dwarfing most of the class. Its upper body looks somewhat normal, but gigantic and exposed. It's smooth, featureless, and looks to be made of some kind of metal, with golden chains and jewelry draped over every part of it, almost drowning her in the heavier, gaudier material. The arms seem longer than they should be, with flowers growing out of the wrists. Large brown wings extend from its back with several smaller wings fitted around it, like they were glued there haphazardly in an attempt to just stick them on. Its head is that of a swan, curved, elegant neck wrapped in broken golden chains. A small metal tiara rests almost daintily on its head, and its red eyes glare accusingly at every single one of them. It has no legs, broken golden chains dangling where its legs might have been. The shadow opens its mouth and screams in pure rage, sounding far too human to prevent shivers from traveling down Hanta's spine. It sounds so much like Uraraka. Fight me. Come on, isn't this what you want? A real fight? Let's see how you do now. The shadow rises into the air, then plunges straight back down to dive bomb them. She's targeting the stronger students. Uraraka yells, and sure enough, the horrifying creature is headed straight for Bakugo. She must know his arm is injured. Hanta throws his tape out, wraps it around Bakugo, and hastily yanks him back. Hey, careful with that shit. Bakugo yells. The shadow crashes into where he was only seconds ago, and there's a great cacophony of metal against metal. The structure shakes, but it holds. The students pounce on her, but then stumble and fall off her back as increased gravity pulls them back down, undoubtedly messing with their ability to even stand up straight. Some manage to regain their balance on the girders, their gravity returning to normal only a few seconds later. Others stumble and fall into the darkness below. Uraraka and Midoriya dive off the structure, grabbing students and using their quirks to pull them back up before they can hit the ground. Todoroki sends his ice to catch several more. Hanta sends his tape flying to grab 2 of his classmates, anyone who won't be able to save themselves, but his heart catches in his throat as he sees a familiar slip of pink tumbling away into the darkness. His first target is decided instantly, and 1 line of tape goes shooting down towards Ashido. He feels a yank as she grabs hold, and breathes a sigh of relief as he catches Tokoyami with the other line. How much do you think this weighs, Zero? The shadow asks, and a shudder rips through Hanta's body at it addressing him directly. He looks up, and it's floating above them again. But now she's holding an entire 10-foot by 10-foot pallet filled with bricks in her deformed hands. She must have grabbed it while they were distracted. Hanta hastily sets Ashido and Tokoyami down. Is it aiming for me? But I'm not the strongest in the class. I'm not even close. Trying to stop me from becoming the best? The shadow asks, staring Hanta down. He takes a step back. Fine. Take my victory, and I'll take what you desire as well. Wait, what? Hanta thinks. Then the shadow laughs, dropping the pallet down the central area between the 4 girder-made pillars. It falls with far more force than it could naturally possess. Hanta yanks Shuji back from the edge so he doesn't get hit by a stray brick, but most of the students are out of its range. What is she hoping to gain by dropping a bunch of weight into the inside of the building? Suddenly Ida shouts, diving off his girder and towards the ground. A second later Midoriya is screaming for Uraraka and Hanta to follow Ida, and Hanta trusts him enough to hastily use his tape to grab hold of lower girder, swinging himself down. Then he hears a third cry, of shock, of guilt, coming from usually calm Tsuyu high above. A name. She's shouting a name, and Hanta's blood runs cold when he hears whose it is. Kaminari. Hanta shoots a line of tape onto one of the lower girders, far lower than he'd normally reach. The range will cost him control of his movements, but he doesn't care. Kaminari should have been safe. He wasn't a threat to anyone. In his state his quirk shouldn't have been considered a threat, even to Shadow Uraraka, so why is she targeting him? Is it just because Hanta took one of the top students away? Could Uraraka really be that cruel? He swings desperately through the air, but his speed is no match for the shadow's increased gravity. Hanta's best friend, still dazed, can only look on as the giant pallet comes down on top of him. In the moments before it hits, Hanta resists the urge to close his eyes, to look away. He's glad he didn't. From the darkness there's a flash of gold, grabbing onto Kaminari and yanking him out of the way. Stumbling and retreating from the fight, Kaminari's savior pulls him away into the black. Hanta takes a moment to breathe, frantic heartbeat now settling. That was too close. That must have been All Might who grabbed him. Hanta will have to thank him for that after this all is done. He doesn't want to imagine how things would be without Kaminari. He can hear Ashido give a choked sob of relief as well, followed by a furious war cry and a low hiss as a glob of acid flies through the air towards the shadow. Looks like I missed. Don't worry, it won't happen again. Uraraka's shadow grins, already grasping for another set of materials to throw. Her attention turns to Todoroki, who is trying to freeze anything that she could throw at them in the future. She flaps her wings, and a strong gust of wind knocks over one of the girders, sending it straight for the ice user. Midoriya is there instantly, knocking the girder away. "Uraraka," he shouts, and Uraraka jumps onto the girder. A second later, it's no longer falling but rising up into the air. Several other students jump onto it as it moves up, using it to get close to the shadow. The shadow flaps her wings again, and the girder is sent flying away. The students stumble, and some nearly fall, then she dives on top of them. Uraraka's whole face turns green when her shadow touches the girder. There's a moment of perfect suspension, where the girder is still without even the usual up and down motions of things Uraraka makes float. Then it drops, not quickly, like most things the shadow has touched, but it does fall. Hanta reaches to grab it with his tape, and the sudden force of it nearly sends him falling off his perch, but Ashido grabs him from behind, her strong arms wrapped around his torso and some kind of sticky acid anchoring them down. "Thanks." Hanta manages, ignoring the strain on his quirk until Todoroki's ice seals the girder in place. His elbow is sore, but hopefully that'll heal quickly enough. "Ashido, you can let us out now," he says, but the only response he gets is a malcontent hum. Ashido? Now that he isn't dealing with the girder, he's started to realize how strong Ashido's arms are, and that the softness pressing against his back, nope. Not going there. "I've never used this acid on another person before," Ashido says with a nervous laugh. "Normally I'd just use some more acid to get out of this, but you don't, have an immunity like I do." "Ashido." Hanta knows his face is burning. This is so not the time. "Are you telling me we're stuck?" "I'm sorry, I'll fix it." There's a soft hissing as the sticky acid around Ashido's feet begins to melt away. "Ashido, I love you, and I really appreciate the save, but please don't burn my feet off." "I've got you, don't wait, you what?" "I meant that as an expression, I swear. I mean, it's not like I'm opposed to it, it's at this point that Bakugo has had enough of their nonsense and speaks up. "Just do something and shut the fuck up, you romantic delinquents." "I'm working on it." Ashido yells back. "We are so lucky the shadow isn't targeting us right now," Hanta thinks with a shaky exhale. There's a final gurgle of acid on the glue-like substance that covers them, and then the material weakens enough for Hanta to jerk his feet out. It cracks and crumbles as he tries to shake it off. Ashido hastily backs away from him. Thanks," Hanta mutters, staring down at the girders. "Yeah, don't mention it," Ashido replies quickly. Above them there's a victorious scream. Then people are yelling, and ice is covering half the shadow, originating from the tiny figure it's got wrapped in the chains where its legs should be. After ice fails to stop it, fire starts burning across its body too. This made the chains sway to and fro even more, knocking against the figure's head several times. The shadow ignores what has to be excruciating pain even as the smell of burning feathers fills the air. It's got Todoroki, because of course Hanta can't have 5 seconds to recover from the Ashido incident, as he's dubbed it in his mind. The captured boy has managed to slow the thing with iced and burned wings, at least, but judging by the show at the sports festival, Hanta knows there's no way any version of Uraraka will go down without a fight. He probably should have given her more credit at the sports festival. A lot more credit. Midoriya tries to jump at it, but as soon as he gets close the shadow whips a chain out to hit him, and he drops. It doesn't have Uraraka's 5 fingers to activate rule, dipshit. Don't just throw yourself at it without a plan. Bakugo snaps, then turns to the rest of the class. Who has quirks that hurt on impact? Does he still not know everyone's quirks? Wait. Hanta glances at Ashido standing beside him. She's throwing globs of acid at the shadow, but she's just too far away to hit. "You said quirks that hurt on impact? You don't have one, soy sauce." "Yeah, I know." Hanta turns to Ashido, a maniacal grin almost splitting his face in two. She looks at him, blinks, and then it clicks in her head. An equally vicious smile covers her face. "Let's do it." Hanta had been practicing this move with Kaminari and Ashido for over a month, but the rather high rate of Ashido and Kaminari unintentionally slamming into walls has kept them from showing their classmates yet. Well, practice time is over, Hanta supposes. Hanta wraps his tape around Ishido's waist and pulls his elbow back. This bitch empty, Ishido yells, and a few of their classmates, mostly those who can't reach Uraraka's shadow, turn to look at them in confusion. Bakugo stares at them with dawning horror. Hanta wraps the line of tape she's attached to around his arm a couple more times to give himself more leverage. Ishido jumps as high as she can, and Hanta throws her up and towards the shadow with as much force as he can muster. Wait, he yells. Did you name your attack after a fucking old meme? Bakugo shouts, and Hanta can hear Ishido howling with laughter as she flies through the air, secreting massive amounts of acid that Hanta knows could burn right through concrete. It had taken them a long time to get it to where she wouldn't accidentally burn through his tape and go flying into a wall. The shadow sends a chain to try and slam her down, but the second it connects with the gel coating Ishido's body it screams, the chain melting into a silvery liquid that falls lifelessly towards the ground. Ishido intentionally hadn't generated acid on her hands so that she can grab hold and begin to pull herself up the creature's body towards Todoroki, but the acid coating the rest of her melts the chains so quickly that she has to move with extra speed, pulling herself up the chains with only her upper body strength. Really nice arms. As she climbs up to the base of the chains, Ishido finally coats her hands in acid to dissolve them. Shadow Uraraka seems frenzied by pain, and is doing everything in her power to shake Ishido off. Midoriya! Catch! Ishido shouts, and the chains connecting Todoroki to the shadow finally give out, sending him plummeting to the ground. A green-colored blur practically flies through the air to catch him, broken remains of chains trailing behind them. They land not too far from Hanta, who is pulling Ishido back to land safely on the girder. Excellent combination, Siro and Ishido. All Might calls from a few floors below them. For a moment, Hanta's heart nearly bursts from the praise. All Might thought that was a good combo. However, it doesn't last. Hanta's mind screeches to a halt, and his heart plummets. All Might is only a few floors under, exactly where he's been the entire fight. He couldn't have reached the ground in that moment, not even with the second of power his quirk gave him. He couldn't have saved Kaminari. He tries to shake that thought. It's horrible and implausible that All Might didn't save Kaminari. It's All Might. Maybe Hanta just doesn't understand the situation fully. He feels he can spare a second to at least ask where he put Kaminari. Thanks. And thank you for saving Kaminari. All Might gives him a look of confusion, and Hanta feels his heart catch in his throat. No, Ishido whispers beside him, surely coming to the same conclusion as he is. A flash of blonde hair, darting far below them. A figure half concealed in darkness, grabbing Kaminari and pulling him out of the way. Who would have done that if not All Might? All the students had been in the air. Maybe Present Mike? But he knows better. If Present Mike and Aizawa had come back, they would have joined the fight. Bakugo, Aoyama, and Ojiro were fighting Shadow Uraraka, and Present Mike isn't here. That accounts for every blonde in the group. No, Hanta thinks, and his voice echoes his thoughts. Shit. Because that only leaves one possibility. His shadow, Ishido says weakly. She turns to the rest of the class. Kaminari's shadow has him. Kirishima nearly falls off the girder, and Bakugo swears even more violently than usual. He looks at the rest of the group, though not many had heard Ishido. You all can deal with Freddy Krueger's Bird's Ona. Kirishima, Soy Sauce, Raccoon Eyes, we're going after the Pikachu knockoff's knockoff. Hanta nods and grabs Bakugo with one line of tape and Ishido with the other, lowering them both. Kirishima begins swinging down, using his quirk to avoid taking any damage from the unusually high jumps. Wait, we need to stay together. Ida yells, probably gesturing with his arms. All Might tries to protest as. Well, don't care. Ishido yells, letting Hanta drop her. As per usual, she expects the others to understand what she means without further explanation. Kaminari is our first priority. There's no way in hell we're just leaving him in his shadow's hands, Hanta says. Sorry if that means we're splitting the group up, but we're doing it anyways. All the pain my smile failed to erase rushes back to me and nearly knocks me back. My heart is soaring, fervently burning. But despite it all I don't regret it. Izetta, The last which, leaned lie English cover, crossed the line. Shudo must have fallen unconscious after being hit by that chain. That's the only thing that can possibly explain this. It has to be all a dream. Midoriya is holding him, and if not for the circumstances, Shudo could have considered it hugging. This has to be a dream, he thinks to himself again, words repeating like a mantra in his head. The dull ache in his body and sharp pain in his leg from where a chain had dug in too tightly dispels that illusion, and the realization that this is, in fact, reality slams into him at full speed. He groans softly and tries to stay still, not wanting to distract Midoriya any further from the fight. I got you, Midoriya says. Shudo wonders to himself if being in love can cause heart attacks. I won't let you fall. I promise. Shudo breathes and leans further on Midoriya, trying not to jar any of his injuries. A loud, thundering bird cry rings in his ears, and through the pain, he tries to look for the source of the noise. Uraraka's shadow seems to be moving to attack a group of people who are, they're running away from the group. That's not very good, is it? Pain is buzzing in his head. One of the chains must have hit it while he was getting knocked around. Maybe he'll have a chance to rest once this battle is finally over. A ringing in his ears joins his various other pains. Hopefully soon his injuries will heal. Aizawa-sensei had said that wounds heal quicker in this world, right? Midoriya is looking at him with an odd expression on his face. Hold on, you have something. He reaches up to touch Shudo's hair, and vaguely, he can see blood on his hand as he pulls it away. Swallowing down the pain, Shudo finally gathers himself enough to speak. Do you have a plan? He asks, voice hoarse. Midoriya always has a plan. He has to. Shudo doesn't think they can win this fight without something smart. Midoriya shifts on his feet. Well, I have a few ideas, he responds. First, though, we need to get Uraraka's shadow off of their backs. He nods towards the others that Shadow Uraraka had been attacking. Shudo recognizes Bakugo, Kirishima, Siro, and Ishido. I'm sorry, but, can you make a bridge for me or something like that? So I can get close? Shudo makes a non-committal noise and slowly disentangles himself from Midoriya so that he can stand on his feet. Yeah, he says, already moving his feet to spread ice in an arc towards the shadow. It's distracted by Bakugo's group. Midoriya has the perfect opportunity to make a move. Looking back only once to exchange a glance of silent thanks with Shudo, Midoriya runs across the bridge, energy crackling along his skin. With a powerful kick, he leaps through the air, flying towards the shadow with his fist reeling back. The beast has only enough time to turn its head before Midoriya makes impact, slamming his fist into the base of the shadow's neck and sending both of them tumbling to the ground. Shudo winces. Midoriya is going to have trouble escaping. Other students are already trying to distract Shadow Uraraka so that he can get away, but he can't tell that it's working. If anything, it seems to only be making the shadow angrier. On shaking legs, he tries to get closer to the fight, but Uraraka's shadow's attacks are starting to kick up so much dust and debris that he can barely see anything. Specks of dust are flying into his eyes, only worsening his headache. The shadow finally seems to calm down, and the dust begins to clear. Blinking away tears, Shudo looks at the rest of the class. They're all starting to become tired. This can only end badly at this point, can't it? The ominous creaking of the building frame keeps sounding through the silence as Shadow Uraraka stares the group down, beak open wide with sharp fangs bared at them. It bears only a small resemblance to a smile. The shadow's grin widens, and it lets out a low roar before flying straight into the building. Dread fills Shudo from head to toe as the building starts to cave in, metal flying down towards the class like an avalanche. Shudo springs into action before he can stop himself, ice carrying him up towards some of the students in the building. Below, Uraraka darts towards an already collapsed girder. Her fingers brush it, just enough for it to rise into the air with her clinging onto it. Throw me, she shouts, and Azui complies. Her tongue shoots out, wrapping around the girder, and with her help, the girder is sent flying into the midst of the collapsing building. Uraraka reaches out and touches every piece of metal she can reach, and it isn't much, but it slows the fall some, Shudo can tell. The shadow comes to a stop in the air, seeming to be trying to catch its breath, but Azui jumps at it. It veers backwards, trying to get away, but Azui's tongue wraps around it and brings it crashing into the ground. Uraraka is lying motionless atop her girder. Shuto suddenly realizes. The girder has settled back onto the ground, and the girl's face has blanched. Tokoyami has joined Azui in trying to keep Uraraka's shadow down on the ground, and Shuji is defending the others from some of the falling rubble. Shuto sets one of his classmates on the ground, and suddenly, a crash rends the air, and at least 5 floors of the building come crashing down, a storm of dust and flying cement following. Shuto sends ice rushing towards it, hoping to slow the fall, and he sees Shuji reach towards Tokoyami to pull him back. Through the cacophony of sound created by the fall, Shuto hears Midoriya shout, "She's overusing her quirk." He jerks, turning his head to look at Uraraka's shadow, and his foot pivots unexpectedly. His ice is sent cutting through the air towards the shadow rather than the falling debris. Without Shuto's wall of ice to stop it, the rubble crashes into the ground, splitting the already scattered class into halves. Shuto looks around, searching. The Midoriya is on the same side as him, and he looks unscathed. But before he can revel in the small victory of Midoriya's safety, a scream catches his attention on the other side of the crash. Dark shadow is rising above the debris, something pale caught in its beak. Oh God, is that an arm? Shuto feels sick to his stomach looking at it. Someone, Tokoyami, or Shuji, maybe, must have been hurt. The shadow is beginning to panic, Shuto can tell. Between Dark Shadow's anger and Shuto's ice, it doesn't have much of a chance. It seems to realize this, and without warning, nearly every piece of rubble in the air jerks, beginning to rise up instead of fall down. Soon after, a gust of wind blows past Shuto, nearly knocking him down in his exhausted state as Shadow Uraraka flies up into the air. Without the weight of an entire building holding it down, it can dodge the students' attacks with ease. Don't let it rest. All Might calls out. It's going up to regain its strength. Uraraka steps forward on shaking legs, victorious grin on her face, a direct contrast to the clear exhaustion showing in her body. She's not going anywhere, she declares, before raising her hands and pressing the tips of her fingers together. Release first wave. A fraction of the rubble Uraraka has lifted into the air starts to plummet down towards her shadow, but it dodges with relative ease. A sense of déjà vu starts to come to Shuto. This is just like what happened at the sports festival, isn't it? Release second wave. Half of the remaining debris begins to fall, and the shadow tries to dodge again, but its movements are beginning to slow. It isn't quite fast enough to avoid a huge boulder crashing down, and 2 of its wings are sent falling, smoking and mangled, to the ground below. The shadow wavers in the air, some of its balance lost, but it keeps trying to fly back up. Bakugo taught me that anyone good in a fight can save themselves from falling debris at least once, Uraraka says, standing weak, but triumphant. So Tsuyu's been helping me practice choosing what I release. Because you can dodge me once, and if you're really good you can dodge me twice. She smiles up at her shadow, and Shuto knows that this time, she's won. Release third wave. The last of the debris falls, and now, the shadow can do nothing to save itself. But 3 strikes and you're out. A girder comes down and impales the shadow through the chest, and it plummets back to earth with a dull, sorrowful cry. Smoke erupts from where the shadow lands, and everyone rushes to look in triumph over their victory. Shuto finally feels like he can breathe again, and he stumbles over to stand by Midoriya's side. As the smoke clears away, they all look down at the shadow, and suddenly, Shuto's breath is caught in his throat again. The steady feeling of inhale and exhale is lost, and when he spares a glance up at the rest of the class, he can see that they all feel the same way. The shadow, she looks just like Uraraka. Laying there, she almost seems to be sleeping, eyes closed peacefully without the hateful expression that twisted it earlier, marring it. But the metal beam sticking out of her stomach ruins any illusion of sleep. There's no way she could have survived that fall, Shuto suddenly realizes, and the Shadow Realm heals all injuries in half-time. He knows that the passage of time can't heal death. Everyone looks sick. Midoriya is muttering to himself rapidly, clearly trying to rationalize what's just happened. Ida is frozen, shaking slightly as he looks at the spot where Uraraka's shadow is slowly fading away, pieces of skin flaking off and blowing away in the wind. All Might is deathly still as well, barely even breathing as he watches the likeness of his student begin to disappear like nothing more than dust on the wind. Tsuyu is hunched over, ready to collapse at any moment. Uraraka, it's hard to tell how she feels. She keeps staring at her own hands with a distant, faded look in her eyes, occasionally glancing up to look at the shadow with guilt. With a pang, Shudo recognizes the feeling of no, this wasn't supposed to happen, it's my fault mine that he felt when his mother was taken away, when the screeching of a boiling kettle became his ruin. The whole area seems even darker than before, its colors washed out like an old film reel that's been played too many times. The ominous, heavy feeling that had covered the area is gone, but it doesn't feel complete. The feeling of wholeness, the feeling of all is right in the world that had washed over the group after the encounter with Sato's shadow isn't there. It feels empty, and Shudo doesn't know if that's better or worse. Azui takes a step back and vomits and gasps for air, before trying to hastily pull herself together. She keeps glancing towards Uraraka, clearly wanting to comfort her, but Shudo can see that she's in no condition to help anyone right now. None of them are, really. Uraraka keeps staring at the smoking, mangled chest of the her who isn't her. The girder is nearly as wide as her own body, and while the shadow's face is still intact, the same can't be said for the rest of her body. "Hey," Uraraka says, her voice at a low, soft deadpan. She looks numb. "I accept you. I admit that I sometimes wish I was the strongest. Please get up. I can't look at my own face like that." Midoriya and Ida, still both shaking, rush to Uraraka's side to offer support. But she drops to her knees before they can grab hold of her, and her fists clench in the remains of her shadow's uniform shirt. "Hey," she shouts, voice trembling. "Get up. Don't just lie there. What will my parents think? Their only daughter, dead, but they can't even take a day off to mourn her. I can't do that to them. Wake up. We just got our provisional license. We never got to do that internship that 13 only offers to upperclassmen, or become pro-heroes. There's so many things I want to do, so get up. Get up. Please get up." Uraraka has curled up into a ball on the ground. Ida wraps one arm around her back to give her some kind of support. Midoriya joins them, and a few seconds later Azui follows after. "I don't want to die." Bits of the shadow's corpse, starting from extremities like the nose and hands, start to flake off into black specks, flying away on a faint breeze. In less than a minute, all that's left to show that there had once been a person there is black staining on the steel beam. It's finally setting in how desperate their situation is. "What the fuck did you just fucking say about me, you little bitch? I'll have you know I graduated top of my class in the Navy SEALs." Ancient proverb. Material Girl has added Bone Man, Carrie, and 19 others to the group. Material Girl has changed the chat name to We Are Number One. Danizuko, oh god. Material Girl, what's up sluts? Danizuko, oh good. No has left the group. Material Girl has added No to the group. No, leave me alone. Black Viper, what the actual fuck? Material Girl, hey babe, how you doing? Black Viper, hi. What the hell is this? Material Girl, our counterparts just left the UA campus. I thought y'all might want to know. Living Knife Cat, why? So we can watch them kick your ass? I think I'll pass. Material Girl has removed Living Knife Cat from the group. Supernova has added Living Knife Cat to the group. Supernova, don't be mean. Black Viper, yes, be mean. Black Viper, why is the fucking gremlin here anyway? Supernova, I'm not a gremlin, I'm a shadow. Oh. Black Viper, whatever, just don't feed it after midnight. Black Viper has changed Supernova's name to Brat. Black Viper, 3C. Carrie has changed Brat's name to Supernova. Black Viper, really? Carrie, try me bitch. Baby you're firework, as fun as it is to watch you squabble. Baby you're a firework. Read, not at all. Baby you're a firework. Can we talk about the actual issue here? Does anyone know where they're headed? Candyman, towards me I think. Material Girl, eat someone strong for me please and thank. Living Knife Cat, Carrot, because she knows she can't kill anyone herself. Material Girl, Oh shut up, he might as well do something useful in the 5 minutes before they kick his ass. Candyman, thanks for the vote of confidence, guys. Bone Man, I believe in you, if that helps. Candyman, nice. Candyman, we meeting for tea at the usual place? Bone Man, naturally. Carrie, emo fuck doesn't count, he probably believes in my netta. Bone Man, the offense. Managing, I don't know him. Depression.png, why is my phone blowing up? Material Girl, managing, just. Turn it off and go back to bed babe, I'll come wake you up in a bit. Depression.png, fine, but I'm holding you to that. Managing, yeah, love. Denizuko, gross. Carrie, you're welcome to come hang with me anytime. Denizuko, why would I ever want to spend time with you and your 0, redeeming qualities? Carrie, https://www.youtube.com/watch?v=v50dvvi52. Black Viper, okay I'm gonna stop this right here. Waifu is shit. We don't have to listen to you, you little shit. No one put you in charge. Voldemort, I don't see why they shouldn't be in charge, particularly when the alternatives include someone as immoral and depraved as you. Material Girl, square up bitch. Waifu shit. Oh you're both going down, I'll RIP your goddamn lungs out. Bone Man, chanting fight 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 fight. Alpha Gay, what's this? You are waifu is shit. Material Girl, 3C. Living Nefket, let's just forget all of this, shall we? You a waifu is shit, whatever. Intersection, caret underscore minus. Oh what's this? Alpha Gay, that's what I just asked. Material Girl, well it's a story that began long ago. Zinnia, it's a group chat. Material Girl, D, my story. Material Girl, but also Quada you're here. Zinnia, I've always been here, I just couldn't think of anything to say. Material Girl, laughing face. Scaly, on an unrelated note, who taught the one innocent person here how to swear? Intersection, caret underscore minus. Who fucking knows? Like Naya, let him say fuck. Carrie, let him sit. Scaly. Scaly has removed Supernova from the group. Scaly, why are you all like this? Carrie, says the one with the username Scaly. #OneHero. Because we're the rejected parts of one's psyche, left to form our own personalities from those fragmented bits and will never know the love and acceptance our counterparts feel. Stepford so be. One quiet boy, I wanna die. No, God same. Alpha Gay, that's a mood. Black Viper, we all wanna die, alright, let's move on. Managing, wow things sure got dark fast. You waifu is shit, don't you have a significant other to go wake up? Managing, alright, I'll be back. Managing has gone offline. No, that reminds me. No has left the group. Danny Zuko added no to the group. Danny Zuko, if I'm in here, you're suffering with me. No, fuck you. Carrie, is that an open invite? No, fuck you. Carrie, that wasn't an O. Black Viper, good news and bad news everyone. Black Viper, good news is that since my netta is sick, he's not with the class. Black Viper, bad news is that we can't kill him. Carrie, damn it. Voldemort, well then what am I supposed to do with this blade I had saved? Material Girl, stab someone else with it, fuckus. Candyman, my netta's the one person I wouldn't protect, so good. You waifu is shit, well you're terrible at protecting people anyway so. Like Naya, fucking fight me. You waifu is shit, now I thought you didn't care about people. Like Naya, I don't. But you're especially unpleasant, so fight me. Alpha Gay, kill them babe. You waifu is shit, can I have a kiss for good luck? Alpha Gay, OFC. Denizuko, gross. Carrie, can I join in? You a waifu is shit, fuck off. Living Knife Cat, at this point you really should accept no one wants you and no one ever will. Carrie, that would hurt if I gave a shit about your opinion. Bone Man, for noble lords and ladies, you all often prove to be unpleasant. Voldemort, you hurt my feeling. Bone Man, feeling. Voldemort, yes, my one feeling. The stab feeling. I don't know how you hurt it with that. Zinnia, stab, isn't a feeling. Voldemort, well maybe I feel stabby. Living Knife Cat, I'm not some lowly lord or lady. I'm royalty, and you're a useless bunch of peasants. Your waifu is shit, you wanna go you son of a bitch? Living Knife Cat, you're not worth my time. Candyman, I thought you two were friends. Living Knife Cat, we are friends. Your waifu is shit, I guess. Candyman, alrighty then. Candyman, also, does anyone know what's up with this weird gummy bear shadow? 'Cause it's not one of my creations. Scaly, nope. No, can I leave now? Black Viper, no, unity is important. No, how about I do anyway? Zinnia, outdated. Intersection, caret underscore minus. How dare you, history of Japan is a classic. Zinnia, of course the living meme would say that. Material Girl, exposed. Intersection, caret underscore minus. Bitch you thought. I've always been open about being a giant fucking meme. Do you think the shit with the Afro Circus song was a coincidence? Zinnia, and here I thought I was the high meme lord. Intersection, caret underscore minus. You thought you were the high meme lord. Zinnia, oh no. Intersection, caret underscore minus. But it was I, Dio. No has left the group. Baby you're a firework. Was that a motherfucking Giguk reference? Intersection, caret underscore minus. Has left the group. Zinnia, you just wrote has left the group? You didn't actually leave the group. Alpha gay, weirdo. Intersection, caret underscore minus. Y'all are rude. Alpha gay, y'all. Material Girl, y'all. Candyman, y'all. Intersection, caret underscore minus. I'm feeling betrayal in this Chili's tonight. Black Viper to Living Knife Cat. Black Viper, hey so, Black Viper, I was wondering if. Living Knife Cat, whatever you're going to say no. Living Knife Cat, I'm not interested in any form of collaboration, or whatever the hell you're going to try and suggest. Black Viper, okay but maybe you should listen to my suggestion first? Living Knife Cat, I already know that I'm not interested. Living Knife Cat, I have a plan already. I'll kill whoever's left by the time that our alternate selves reach me. I'll take my counterpart's place when they try to return them to the other world, obviously. Living Knife Cat, if I'm feeling especially generous, I'll leave your counterpart alive enough for you to kill yourself. Living Knife Cat, I certainly don't need anyone else's help, especially not yours. Living Knife Cat, you'll just hinder me in the long run. It's not worth it. Living Knife Cat blocked Black Viper. Black Viper, well that was sure something. Black Viper, am not really sure what I was expecting though. Black Viper, I guess I thought that maybe whatever the hell's going on with our counterparts meant that. Black Viper, nobody's seeing this anyway, why am I doing this? Black Viper, douchebag can just enjoy dying alone I guess. Black Viper, fuck if I care. Black Viper, sure is a pain in the ass being the repressed emotions of someone else, huh? Your waifu is shit, alright that's it. I'm done. You're all distracting the one decent person in this group, and the rest of you are just shit. Alpha gay, am I the one decent person? Your waifu is shit, OFC. Alpha gay, love. Your waifu is shit, love. Danny Zuko, if you've got a plan to end this then fucking do it, I want out. You waifu is shit has added no to the group. Black Viper, here we go. You waifu is shit, have you realized anyone can kick anyone from the group chat? No, I hadn't, thank you for telling me. Material Girl, nice talking to everyone, bye. Don't die too quickly, Sadu. Candyman, I care about everyone in this group, but you're all nightmares. Danny Zuko, thank fucking God. No had kicked Bone Man, Carrie, and 18 other from the group. No, sweet silence. No has left the group. I guess humans like to watch a little destruction. Sand castles, houses of cards, that's where they begin. Marcus Zusek, the book thief. Jair, come back. Please snap out of it. Yayorozu tries to yell, but her throat is still too mangled to accomplish anything above a short, raspy exclamation. At the very least, her voice seems to be a bit less hoarse now. Back when they were still at you, still in the real world, Kuji had gotten tired of observing Yaoyorozu constantly chase after her crush. He wonders how long it's been. It feels like an eternity ago. How long have they been in the Shadow Realm now? Now, seeing Yaoyorozu literally sprinting after the girl, he can appreciate her tireless pace. Jairu is fleeing with alarming speed, paying no heed to the environment around them that scratches at her clothes and her body. Thankfully, her strange, jilted movements are slowing her down enough that Kuji and Yaoyorozu can chase in their weakened states. Yaoyorozu is doing her best to support him, arm hooked around his shoulder and practically holding him upright. Even with his weight holding her back, she's still fast enough that she doesn't lose Jairu. He doesn't understand Yaoyorozu. She thinks that she's useless, that she's one of the weakest of their class. And of course, one victory won't take away all of her worries, but she's still going. She's so hurt, so injured, so enervated, and yet she keeps fighting. How does she not get it? She's one of them, too, one of UA's future top heroes. But really, Kuji doesn't quite understand any humans, and they rarely try to understand him either. He doesn't even have any real friends. He'd always been alone with his animals, up until she'd saved him, saved them both during the practical exam. And after that, she'd always been kind to him. She was the first to welcome him to every class gathering he'd cautiously approached. She'd been his first friend, and isn't that a little pathetic? Kuji knows the girl is far closer to many other people than she is with him, but she's still the best friend he himself has ever made. He can't lose her. He can't. He has to keep going. The aching in his legs has dwindled by just a bit, so he speeds up a bit in spite of the ever-lingering pain. They reach a clearing and without warning, all the noise cuts off into silence, and Jairu disappears. There's nothing that can be heard of Jairu's uncoordinated shuffling, no sounds of the birds or the wild animals. Even the wind rustling the leaves and branches has vanished, leaving Kuji and Yaoyorozu clueless as to where Jairu has gone. Their only hint is the hundreds of footprints littering the clearing. Yaoyorozu looks lost. She begins muttering to herself, the words escaping her mouth rivaling Midoriya's tendency to do the same. She scans the area, the footmarks covering the entire valley. All the tracks seem to go in hundreds, perhaps even thousands of directions, and Kuji has no idea where to start. Jairu's shoes, what are they like? He thinks back to a few months ago when they'd had hero outfit consultants in. One of the pro heroes that had come in said that they weren't feminine enough, right? She wears boots with a slight heel. With a twinge of amusement, Kuji remembers how Jairu had looked the hero flat in the face until he'd backed down. He'd suggested stilettos. How could any hero possibly wear stilettos? He shakes his head. He has to focus. He can't spend time reminiscing. The animal tracks can't possibly be Jairu's either, obviously, and knowing what her shoes look like narrows things down a bit. Looking at the tracks, he can only see a few that match Jairu's feet. Yaoyorozu seems to have reached the same conclusion as him. She was limping, right? So her footsteps should be uneven. It's like search and rescue training. Only one set of the remaining footprints matches that, and it seems to be leading to the northwest. Kuji points at it, and Yaoyorozu nods. Nice work, Kuda, she says, already beginning to run ahead of him. As they follow the trail, the noise starts to return gradually, first in the small rustling of the grass and the leaves, and then, slowly, to the sound of Jairu's unsteady limping. They're starting to gain on her. Kuji doesn't know what they'll do once they catch up, but in the end, they don't get the chance to find out. The noises start slowly, just a small click here and there, but then Kuji begins to hear a scraping, grinding noise rising up. He glances around warily as he follows Yaoyorozu through the city. It's becoming less and less familiar as they continue, and around them, the environment seems to be changing. Kuji has seen tufts of grass or weeds break through the hard surface of concrete before, but he doesn't think this is normal. Entire chunks of concrete are being broken up by plants forcing their way up and through. They must be nearing another shadows area. Kuji's hands shake, but nonetheless, he continues on. A sudden sound rings throughout the setting, like rice being shaken in an old tin. But before Kuji can even react to it, another noise makes itself known. On the other side of the buildings, something massive is dragging itself through dirt. Kuji only has to wonder what it is for a moment. Slowly, the structures before him begin to crumble and fall away, revealing what seems to be the remains of an old neighborhood. Everything is overgrown. The concrete and asphalt have been ripped up, revealing soft dirt and forest growth beneath, and one unfortunate home has been split down the middle by a looming tree. In the midst of the open space, Kuji discovers what has been making the noises, but instantly he wishes he hadn't. This really isn't turning out to be his day, is it? Yayu is still stumbling forward towards the. Kuji chokes on his fear, words trapped in his throat. It's just an animal, he can control it, it won't hurt him. He's already beginning to back away. Coward. Useless. His thoughts scream, commanding him to reach out, save Yayu, do something, you idiot. But in the presence of the massive, looming centipede, Kuji's legs lock and his mind shuts down, rendering him useless and unable to do nothing more than watch as Yayu walks forward towards the monster, opening its mandibles wide to close around her tiny frame. He has to do something. Stop, he cries out, almost sobbing with relief as he forces the word up and out into the open. The creature doesn't move. It ignores him, merely giving him a moment's glance before turning its attention back towards its prey. No, no, not again, please, no, Before he can sink further into his panic, something emerges from Yayorozu's arm. She grabs it, and there's a deafening crack as a blast of light flies towards the centipede. The shot lands easily, making the creature howl in pain as bits of its smoking chitin crumble off of its body. A flare gun. But there's no way she's digested enough food to make something that big already. How could she? His question is dreadfully answered when Yayorozu gasps in pain, blood spattering onto the ground as she heaves. The arm on Kuji's shoulder goes from supportive to desperately grasping his shirt. Her grip on the flare gun falters, and she drops it in favor of clutching her abdomen. Kuji hastily moves to support her. A question forms in the back of his throat, but it sticks tight, refusing to allow itself to be voiced. Even so, Yayorozu seems to have read his mind. The liver is mostly fat cells, she explains with a grimace, and it grows back if enough is left. I figured I'd have to use that trick eventually, but, she coughs once more, and Kuji swallows back bile as blood coats the soil below them. Didn't think it'd be this early. Kuji stares at her in horror. She used an organ to make that gun? He thinks, but she ignores him, picking the gun back up with shaking hands and letting loose a second shot on the creature. Yayu finally seems to be stirring from her trance, blinking slowly and looking around. But she's still standing easily within the monster's grasp. It could just reach down and snap her in half. Kuji thinks, stomach tying itself into tight knots. Yayorozu is still holding the flare gun up, but she's shaking still, and of course she is. She just destroyed nearly her entire liver. Kuji searches the area, hoping, begging for any kind of animal he could ally himself with. Can't he do anything to help? The answer, as it turns out, is no. The only living beings that he can see are him, Yayu, Yayorozu, and the centipede. All he can do is hope to give Yayorozu some sort of support. He doesn't mind that he isn't as strong as her, or as Yayu, or any of the others. He just wants to protect living things. The monster seems to decide that its desire for food weighs heavier than its fear of the gun, so it dives at Yayu a third time. Yayorozu shoots as it again, the bang echoing through the abandoned neighborhood. I've only got one more shot, she hisses. If that isn't enough, I'm going to use my hypodermis to make another gun. Can you use it if it knocks me out? The hypodermis, it's the deepest layer of skin. Kuji isn't sure she can even survive extracting that. He swallows, then nods and sets her on the ground. He's still a hero in training, isn't he? Animals or no, he'll charge straight at the creature if he has to. As if it can hear his thoughts, the monster turns to stare straight at him with obsidian black eyes. Its mandibles click together, its chitin gleams in the sunlight. He feels eyes boring into him, lighting him up with blazing, burning, blistering fire. Before he knows it, he's 5 again, practicing his quirk on a group of pretty red ants. He reaches his hand towards them, and they crawl onto his waiting fingers, but it hurts. He screams, poison stabbing into his skin as they surge over him, covering him head to toe in fire. hands brush his skin, trying to wipe away the pain, the hurt, the fire. It's too late. Needles bury themselves into him. His mistake, he shouldn't have tried. It burns. A loud bang shakes Kuji from his memories. Yaoyorozu's final shot has gone off. He shakes his head. Burning, it would be better than losing his friends. As long as he doesn't look, as long as he doesn't see the bug, it'll be okay, right? He runs and he isn't fast, but all that matters is that he can save them. He shoves Jairu to the side, and shutting his eyes, he reels his fist back to punch the monster. But even still, all he gets in return is an injured hand. The creature's attention has turned back to Jairu, now laying on the ground where Kuji had shoved her. Jairu! Yaoyorozu cries out, crawling towards her. Please, snap out of it. I can't do this without you. You're everything to me, you're everything I wish I was. Her voice cuts off abruptly. I love you. Everything goes silent, even the shadow is motionless for a few seconds. Looking at Jairu, Kuji can see her blank expression change to one of pain and sadness as tears well up in her eyes. Yamamo, she whispers. Jairu, Yaoyorozu sobs, relief painted across her face, but the happiness of the moment doesn't last. The monster makes another dive for them, mandibles clicking. Jairu starts scrambling back, striking the centipede's face with her jacks and blasting it with noise, but she's still dazed. The creature stumbles back for a mere moment before continuing. Yaoyorozu drops the weapon in her hand, taking a deep breath, and Kuji realizes she's about to make another gun. But then she pauses, confusion creeping up her features. I can't? The confusion morphs into terror as Jairu just barely dodges an attack. It's beginning to sink in that they might not make this. Kuji can't do anything to help, they're all exhausted from fighting, and it doesn't look like anyone is coming to save them. But that train of thought is quickly quelled as Yaoyorozu's expression of fear changes, revealing joy in its place. She claps her hands over her ears, and a second later, a familiar, ear-piercing scream shoots through the air. The monster yowls, tripping over its own feet as a dark figure jumps on top of it, lines of white cloth flying through the air and binding the creature tight before delivering a brutal kick that sends it crashing down. A yellow-colored bear waddles in after them. Kuji almost sobs in relief. If Present Mike and Aizawa-sensei are here, they're safe. Sorry for the wait, young listeners. Present Mike shouts. I can't use my quirk from too far away unless I want to damage you all equally. You better have a really fucking good explanation for this one, Aizawa-sensei growls. With Jairu and Yaoyorozu both crying and clinging to each other, they're not in any condition to explain, so Kuji does his best to sign an explanation even with his teacher's fury bearing down on him. However, they're all interrupted when Yaoyorozu doubles over and starts heaving blood. Aizawa and Present Mike instantly lose any interest in an explanation and move to sit next to the girl. Present Mike pulls his jacket off and wraps it over her shoulders as more and more blood stains the ground. What happened? Aizawa demands, gruff as ever. I used roughly 75% of my liver to make a flare gun, Yaoyorozu says between heaves. Straight the point as per usual. The teachers give each other a look that screams they have no clue how to fix that. It makes sense, sudden absence of one's liver isn't really a common battle wound, but it still scares Kuji. His teachers are pro-heroes, but even they don't know what to do to help Yaoyorozu. Jairu looks close to throwing up herself, staring down at the blood on the floor. Her eyes flicker over to the empty flare gun, then back to the blood. Back and forth. Before anyone can say anything else, a voice breaks the silence. Stop bleeding, you're scaring the animals off. The voice sounds normal, not like Sada's shadow who spoke with two voices at once. Yaoyorozu's eyes go blank and she slaps both her hands over her mouth. Jairu starts screaming. Shit, Aizawa mutters. That answers why you three walked off. How long before the blood buildup kills her? As he speaks, he shoves Yaoyorozu onto her back and starts performing what looks like a weird form of CPR. Small bits of blood spill between her clenched fingers, but not enough. It's not nearly enough. I'd say 10 minutes max, 3 if it's blocking her airway, Present Mike replies. Kuji can feel his whole body shaking. Aizawa swears again and tries to yank Yayarose's hands away from her face, but this time she fights back. She's going to die unless Kuji does something, and he knows it has to be him because he knows whose shadow this is. He turns and stares at himself, this other him with yellow eyes. They're so like Kaminari's and Ishido's, but at the same time there's a monstrous gleam neither of those classmates possess. They're like molten spotlights instead of warm suns. Let her go, he signs. Why should I? She's just another shitty human. Invading my sanctuary was bad enough, but then she attacked one of my creatures? Unacceptable. Was his simple human voice the way Kuji's selective mutism manifested in that other form? Could all the shadows do such a thing? We didn't know it was a sanctuary. We just wanted to help Jairu. Surely you understand that? Yes, I understand wanting to help your friends, the shadow says. For a moment, Kuji thinks they may be able to get out of the situation unharmed. But I don't understand why you're friends with humans. When have humans ever been nice to me, to any of us? Psst. Kuji signs back. Yes, Kuji's shadow gestures around, and from the destroyed, overgrown houses, animals begin to emerge. Humans. They play at caring. Save the environment, stop bullying. But the second it becomes inconvenient for them, suddenly they don't care anymore. So why should we spare her? Kuji can't believe what he's hearing. This can't be him. To protect, he signs. It's one of his favorite signs, one he likes to motion to himself when he's scared and wondering why. Why do you even want to be a hero? I want people and animals to live long, happy lives. So I protect them. Humans don't deserve that protection. They don't deserve forgiveness. She's my friend. No, she isn't, his shadow spits out. Humans can't be our friends, not when they refuse to actually care. Eraserhead, if you're such a good teacher, then show them all what I mean. Present Mike realizes what's about to happen before Kuji does. He yells, blocking out whatever the shadow says next, but the damage is already done. Aizawa-sensei stops fighting with Yayarozu, and in the same moment the girl stops trying to hold in the blood. But she's lost too much already and goes limp, a small amount of blood dribbles free of her mouth, but Kuji knows that won't buy her any time. Kuji and Jairu watch in horror as their teacher stumbles to his feet like a panther being yanked along on a chain. He turns, eyes blank, and Kuji feels his connection to the bear snap as a white scarf is sent flying through the air. Now here is a riddle to guess if you can. Sing the bells of Notre Dame. Who is the monster and who is the man? The Hunchback of Notre Dame, Bells of Notre Dame. Hizashi surveys the situation, beating back the panic that's already welling up in his throat. He's a pro hero, isn't he? He should know what to do, but something about this is different. Maybe it's that he's never seen anything like this monstrosity before. God, maybe it's the fact that there's a student dying behind him and in a few minutes she'll be dead and it'll all be his fault. He needs to focus. He can't do this, not now, not when everything is at stake. Shoyuta, Eraserhead, he amends, for right now it's so much easier to just think of him as a fellow hero and not his other half who he spent so much of his life with, is being controlled by some kind of brainwashing quirk, and Yayarozu could die of blood loss in mere seconds. Jairu looks to be out of commission. She was controlled by Kuda's shadow, wasn't she? She must still be shaking off the effects. Kuda's bear is a complete wild card in this fight, and Kuda himself is under attack, his quirk useless at the moment. Why did Hizashi let this happen? 4 people to protect and no possibility of getting help, unless he can break the shadow's connection with Eraserhead. Kuda's shadow is beginning to shift, the sound of flesh tearing and bones cracking tying Hizashi's stomach into knots. But before he can even begin to panic, there's a yellow flash in the corner of his vision, and a loud growl cuts through the air as Kuda's bear leaps forward, batting away Eraserhead's capture weapon. Because you couldn't do it yourself, weak, stupid, coward. Hizashi can't possibly know why, but he's not about to stop and ask, not when help has shown up and maybe, just maybe he's not alone in this. A strange, unpredictable gummy bear has to be better than nothing. He has to help the bear and stop Eraserhead. If he hurts one of their students, neither of them will ever forgive themselves for it. If you live through this, if you don't die at his hands soon. Kuda's quirk doesn't seem to be a threat to Eraserhead, so he shifts his focus to the next closest threat, Hisashi himself. He shudders. He can't use his quirk to stop this if Eraserhead is quick about it. Brute force it is, then. He risks a glance at the shadow, and he immediately wishes he hadn't. It's an amalgamation of nearly every animal Hisashi's ever seen, and some that he can't even recognize. Its 3 heads are those of a wolf, a lion, and an ox, each glaring in every direction with monstrous ferocity. 4 powerful legs support the twisted mass of its body, and 2 other limbs extend from the sides, razor-sharp talons glinting at their tips. The entire body is littered with wounds, both fresh and old, but they don't look like battle scars. They look like they're self-inflicted. Don't think about the implications of that, don't you dare. A snake is poised at its back like a tail, a yellow, caustic liquid dripping from its open fangs. What's the word again? Right? Fucking terrifying. Hisashi feels fear clawing at his insides with sharp, wicked talons. He remembers Sada's shadow. How long has it been? Minutes? Hours? Days even? Eraserhead's entire class had barely been able to defeat him, and there's no doubt that this shadow is stronger. Hisashi can't do this by himself. But one small detail catches his eye. One tiny design flaw that could mean everything for him. Can you really fix this? Can you really protect them? All of the heads have ears, and all of them must hear separately. If he's right, then that means that they'll have extremely sensitive hearing, and the telltale tingling in his vocal cords tells him that Eraserhead hasn't activated his quirk yet. You can't, he screams. The shadow howls in pain, the sudden cacophony of sound almost drowning out Hisashi's own voice. Blood drips from each of its sets of ears, but before he can do further damage, his voice cuts short. The tide of panic is starting to recede. He's found his rhythm. He knows how this goes now. Martial arts trainers and pro heroes alike have told him that practicing against the same people leads to bad habits, but now, in battle against the one constant sparring partner he's always had, Hisashi's finding that it isn't so bad. His hands fly up to catch Eraserhead's scarf just as it comes towards him, and he wraps it around his hands once, twice, 3 times as Eraserhead tries to pull it back towards him. They've played this game of tug-of-war all too many times before. Behind him, he hears movement. Thank God, Jair must have recovered enough to join him in his fight. It's a good wake-up call. This isn't just sparring. He could die, and anyone here could die. There are students who he's responsible to protect here, a partner he has to live for. And this shadow is trying to take him away from them, to take them away from him. Hisashi gives a massive yank on the scarf, and the smallest bit of satisfaction bubbles up in him when he sees Eraserhead stumble forward. But that satisfaction falls away to dread as the shadow rushes towards him. He feels rather than hears the beast approach, its footsteps shaking the ground violently as it runs, hooved feet against packed dirt. Eraserhead is already beginning to recover his shaken balance, and Hisashi knows he can't take them both on at once. But Jairu is still on his side, and she slipped around to stand behind Eraserhead. As the creature charges, Jairu jumps onto her teacher and covers his eyes, letting Hisashi use his quirk for just a second more. The speaker around his neck shakes intensely as he directs another powerful shout at the shadow. It howls in pain, rearing up on its hind legs. Hisashi dares to sneak a glance at Yaoyorozu. Kuda is supporting her, struggling to help her cough up the blood trapped in her airways. With a shudder, Hisashi turns back to the fight. He can't get distracted. The kids. It's too late. Eraserhead's scarf wraps around his ankle, and in an instant he's slammed to the ground. He can see Jair too, struggling to break free of the white fabric. The other end of the capture scarf wraps around him entirely, its cloth tightening around his body. This when the pressure is supposed to release, and Shoyuta is supposed to offer him a hand, telling him that you're fine, get up so we can go again. But it doesn't. Hisashi remains firmly trapped. The wrappings are tightening around his neck now, cutting off his breathing. He tries to yell again, but just as he expects, his quirk is gone. 3 minutes without oxygen, 3 days without water, 3 weeks without food. 3 minutes. I have 3 minutes left. He's struck by the sudden realization that he might die here, suffocated by Eraserhead scarves, and bile rises in his closing throat. Black spots cover his vision, drumbeats pounding at his head. He's beginning to lose consciousness when a growl snaps him out of his haze and the bindings around his neck lift. Eraserhead has left to engage the attacker, Jiru? Has Kuda given up on Yaoyorozu in favor of attack? He abandons that thought immediately. He understands his students well enough to know that Kuda wouldn't do that. It's not Jiru, or Kuda, or even Yaoyorozu. It's the gummy bear. Does it have teeth and claws now? Now, isn't that a sight? Eraserhead is being attacked by a sentient, pointy piece of candy. In any other situation, Hizashi would be choking on his own laughter, but right now it's merely serving as a reminder that everything in this realm is deadly. As soon as he's regained some semblance of a steady breath, Hizashi turns to scream at the shadow, which is now attacking the easier prey of Yaoyorozu and Kuda. Jiru is trying to help defend them, her jacks blaring out noise, but the monster does its best to ignore it in favor of slashing at them with its two spindly arms. Jiru shrieks and throws her arms in front of her face as the claws descend on her, but she doesn't move. She stays there, stubborn even as she howls in pain and her arms begin to gush blood, refusing to leave her friends defenseless. That's going to scar horribly, and it must hurt like hell. This class, they're gonna make amazing heroes someday. Hizashi refuses to acknowledge any chance the kids may not last long enough to do that. That pride is more of a passing thought, however, as most of his focus is on yelling at the creature until it backs away from the bloody girl. That works for a few seconds, but then he notices Yaoyorozu slowly curl in on herself, gasping and choking on seemingly nothing at all. The shadows seem to take this as a sign of weakness and pounces on the two. Jiru, despite the state of her arms, which currently resemble mincemeat more than skin, still manages to stick a jack into one of the ears on the wolf head and blast it with noise at point-blank range. The creature howls and stumbles back, blood pouring from the injury. "Stay back," she snarls, and Hizashi can see Shuta's teaching in how she stands with her head high, even as one foot begins to slip in the growing puddle of her own blood, facing against a monster made of her classmates' repressed emotions and her own teacher. But even still, she isn't going to let her face them alone. Kuda dives onto the creature, clawing at the fur around the ox's head in a desperate bid to keep the creature away from his injured friends. The bear is still after Eraserhead, and actually seems to have grown from 3 feet to 5. Hizashi is curious about a lot of things, but he decides pretty quickly he doesn't want to think about how that works. Besides, there are more important things to focus on, like the fight at hand and saving the only student this shadow hasn't injured yet. One fellow hero next to the villain, no forms of sound muffling equipment or ear protection. Can't just keep yelling at it, then. All right. You're an animal, aren't you? He smiles at the creature, but there's no humor in it. The love of his life has been turned against him and 2 of his students have been severely injured, one of them in critical condition. Sorry, but I don't have any cheer to spare right now. So he raises his voice, up and up and up until one of the remaining suburban window cracks in half, then higher still until a look of dawning understanding appears on Kuda's face, and confusion comes over Jiru's. Even she can't hear him at this pitch. Careful to keep his pitch high, he takes in another breath and screams. The students don't show any one of reaction, but the shadow isn't quite as lucky. It howls, a maddened, desperate sound, and stamps its hooves into the earth, trying to cover its ears with its paws. The tail thrashes around and slams into the ground. Kuda desperately holds onto the ox's head as the creature thrashes, and Hizashi is about to run towards him when he hears a sickening thud behind him. He turns around and sees the yellow bear thrown to the ground, wrapped in Eraserhead's capture device. Of course that would affect the bear too. Stupid, stupid, stupid. Dread fills him from head to toe as Eraserhead stares down at the bear, blinks, and then yanks the white fabric back to release the creature. Wait, what? Then Eraserhead, no, Shoyuta is turning to stare down the shadow with murder in his gaze, and Hizashi nearly cries in relief. The creature must be in too much pain to maintain its hold on a victim. You can stop yelling, Hizashi, Shoyuta all but growls. I've got it. Hizashi gratefully stops his screaming, throat burning from overuse of his quirk. The bull opens its mouth, but instead of a bellow or a roar, a pained human voice comes out. Hisashi doesn't care. He's moving to kneel next to Yaoyorozu. Her arms are pressed tightly to her chest, but they're easy enough to shove aside, and he starts CPR. The flare gun she was trying to use earlier falls to the ground. Jairu watches over them, seemingly unaware of her own wounds as she waits for Yaoyorozu to wake up. Finally, there's a desperate hacking noise, and bloody spittle is sprayed all over Hisashi's jacket. He doesn't care. "Easy, easy," he says, gently lifting her head. She coughs a few more times, trying to get the last drops of blood in her lungs out. Her breathing is shaky and strained, and her whole body is trembling. "Yamamo," Jairu gasps, the name dissolving into a sob as she presses her face helplessly against Yaoyorozu's shoulder. She's too injured to hug the girl properly. "Jairu?" Yaoyorozu manages, clearly trying to reorient herself with her surroundings. Then her wandering eyes fall onto Jairu's injuries. "Jairu, your arms?" "I'm fine," Jairu says through her tears. "As long as you're okay, I'm fine." And for a moment, Hisashi is reminded of a different pair of now former students. A black-haired prodigy and the music lover who would follow him to the ends of the earth. Maybe in the end he's starting to see too much of himself in the students. A roar, followed by an all-too-familiar cry of pain jerks away his attention. He nearly gets whiplash from how fast he turns to check what happened. The beast has managed to catch Shoyuta by the leg and is squeezing into it, the fangs cutting through the tough fabric of his pants like a hot knife through butter. He doesn't want to think of what it was doing to him. Shoyuta is fighting to keep his eyes open, to keep the students safe from the monster's quirk. Hisashi's brain starts pumping, offering solution after solution, but none of them are fast enough. Yaoyorozu's eyes flicker from Jairu's tears, mixing in with the blood that coats her body, then to the monster Shoyuta, Kuda, and the gummy bear are fending off. "I should have built up enough," she mutters, reaching out a hand to grab the nearby flare gun. Hisashi watches her, ready to stop her if needed, as a tiny glow emerges from the palm of her hand. Out rises a single round for the flare gun. She slams it into position and fires. Because of the angle she couldn't have hit the middle head, the ox, that has hold of Shoyuta. But the lion head bellows in pain, twisting in the light for a moment before it goes limp. Hisashi takes that as his cue, yelling in the creature's face long enough to startle it as the students begin to dive on top of the shadow. Hisashi grabs Shoyuta by the arm and easily pulls him from the dazed beast's jaw, and something twinges in his chest as he feels the other man relax slightly into his grip. He carries Shoyuta with both of his arms so that he's pressed against his chest as close to him as possible, but still able to look where he needs. Shuta's leg is bleeding over the already blood-soaked ground. Hisashi's certain he's never seen this much red in his life. Jairu's jacks are like snakes of her own as they grab a hold of the viper tail, blaring noise every time it resists. She jabs both jacks into the base of the tail, and with a grunt yanks the entire thing off the creature's body. "Sonny, please," Hisashi hears Kuda say, in that voice that's too garbled, the rhythm too uneven, to be considered human tongue. He signs a symbol over his chest, one present Mike knows well. "Protect." The gummy bear, Sonny, howls and charges at the much larger shadow. In that moment, Hisashi is hit with a smell emanating off the bear. It's the sweet sugar of the cookies Sata brought into class, the dusty, loved scent of Jairu's records. It's hot metal and chemicals. A flare gun, the mark of a savior, carved from Yaoyorozu's very life force. It's blood. The blood drying on Yaoyorozu's lips, the blood on Jairu's arms, the blood seeping from Shuta's leg. "Your quirk has to do with your voice, correct, young listener?" He received a hasty nod in return. "Well, that's a great quirk to have. You know, if you can speak just the right words you can push others beyond what they thought themselves capable of." "The right words?" Kuda signed, a nervous expression on his face. "Poor kid, always looks kind of nervous, that one." "Or word, it doesn't really matter. But think on it, all right?" Looks like Kuda found the word he needs. The bear pounces onto the wolf's head, claws digging into its eyes, and a moment later Kuda follows after. He winds his fist back and slams it into the ox head's snout. The beast stumbles, jerking for a few moments, even with two heads quickly losing life. It gazes at Kuda in what seems to be confusion. After a moment of eye contact, the shadow closes its eyes, and the fur seems to shift away. All that's left now is that other Kuda, bleeding and beaten in the grass. He looks up at them with hatred in his eyes. Aizawa is staring down at him from where Hisashi is cradling him, eyes a gleaming red. But why did you risk everything for humans? What have they ever done for you? Hisashi can tell Kuda knows his answer. He watches the boy sign it almost reverently. Protect. His shadow glares at him, not even a phantom of the fear and hesitation that Hisashi has come to associate with this student in its eyes. You keep using that word, but I don't think you know what it means. It means to stand by people at even the worst of times, and to sacrifice your life for their safety. People don't somehow become worthy of being protected. Life is precious, so it should always be. Even if sometimes I have trouble believing that myself, it only means I have to stand by that ideal even more. Kuda's shadow laughs, ending in a painful cough that spits up blood. Fine. You win. Just protect all life equally. Don't forget those who can't speak for themselves, including you. He starts to flake away, his fingers and nose being the first to turn into golden dust, and before long, nothing is left of him. There's a moment of stillness where everyone finds themselves staring down at where the shadow once was. The only sound is the area slowly shifting and changing around them. The cracked concrete mends itself, but allows the vegetation and animals to remain. It's like they lived in harmony. It's broken only by a soft tap on his shoulder, and Hisashi looks down at Shoyuta curiously. What is it? Could you please put me down now? He doesn't really want to, but he knows Shoyuta wants to look strong for the kids. So he lets go, and Shoyuta stands up, using him for support as he stands on his injured leg. Hisashi surveys the area, but he detects no movement in the houses around them, and found himself relaxing slightly. It seems like the area would be safe for at least a while longer, but it would be much better if they had supplies. The houses. Do the houses have supplies in them? He asks to no one in particular. It would be worth checking, Jiru says. Her classmates are too busy fretting over her wounds to respond. And Momo's wounds. And everyone's wounds. Wow, there are a lot of injuries. Most of them should probably be treated immediately. He gently grabs Shuta's arm and motions for him to sit down, which he does obligingly, and he heads for the nearest house, carefully opening the door and taking a look inside. A few minutes later, he comes out, a little disappointed. A few first aid kits, some gauze, bandages. It's not nothing, but it won't help Jiru's arms or Shuta's leg, or, hell, Momo's missing organ. Not for the first time, Hisashi has to seriously wonder about the purpose of this exercise, but it's not the time for things like that. He walks back towards the group, trying to appear more confident than he actually feels. As he approached, he could hear a few snippets of conversation from the others. So, Sunny? It seemed fitting. Kuda signs a bit sheepishly. That's fair, Yayarosa laughs, despite the obvious pain in her stomach, and Hisashi is in awe of her determination to keep so composed. Her injuries must be killing her. Hey, we should probably get some rest and recover a bit. Shuta's right. Now that his adrenaline high has worn off, Hisashi is exhausted. It's been hours since they first set foot in the Shadow Realm, and he can only hope that someone's noticed how long they've been under. It's a comforting thought that someone might rescue them soon. Hey, Zashi. Find anything useful? His partner's voice snaps him back to reality. Nothing much, he says, gesturing to the feeble pile of supplies he had acquired, and Shoyuta sighs before addressing the whole group. We'll figure out what to do with the rest of this later, but for now we should focus on getting injuries treated. Jiru, Yayarozu, you two have the most severe injuries, so you'll receive treatment first. Come over here and we'll see what we can do. At some point, Hisashi sits down next to Shoyuta as he works on bandaging the students, and he finds himself subconsciously leaning his head on Shuta's shoulder. He tries to pick his head up, but his body refuses to cooperate, eyes already sliding shut. He feels someone adjusting his body, moving him off his partner's shoulder and onto the ground. Opening his eyes finds Shoyuta staring down at him, face uncharacteristically soft. Sleep, Hisashi. And so he does, his head resting in Shuta's lap and thoughts of rescue drifting in his head. After all, too much time has passed for someone not to notice. Right? Standing outside of a door labeled Guidance Counselor's Office, Pro Hero Midnight fiddles with the cuff around her wrist nervously. The room inside is strangely quiet for a class containing the infamous 1A, and it's giving her a bad feeling. She's not sure why. It should be a good thing that this Umbra woman can keep control of her classes. Nemuri reaches out a hand slowly towards the doorknob. Her hand inched forward until it's closed around the steel knob, her mind reminding her again and again why intruding on a class was an awful idea, and yet. She opens the door to 22 peacefully sleeping bodies and a bored-looking teacher. What's going? My class, Midnight? Himio Maki looks unimpressed by this sudden intrusion, and Nemuri's instantly on edge. You should be well aware that my quirk involves the recipient being asleep, yes? She raises an eyebrow, calm and composed. As does yours. You're using your quirk on students? For an entire class period? Is this allowed? Nemuri's carefully painted nails bite into her palms. Yes, they've only been inside for about. Umbra checks her watch. 20 minutes? Really, you shouldn't worry so much. Nemuri's eyes narrow. It's my job to worry. Well, you've done your worrying now. Could you perhaps leave? She's so dismissive, and it rubs Nemuri the wrong way. Nemuri steps toward her threateningly. Make me. Come on now. Endeavor wouldn't be pleased if he knows someone was interrupting our class, would he? Umbra smirks up at Nemuri, who was practically standing above her now, seething with rage. It's a good thing that the bell rings right then, because Nemuri isn't sure what she would have done otherwise. It wouldn't have been good, to say the very least. She dismisses herself with a quick class, and walks out, clenching and unclenching her fists. Nemuri takes a moment to compose herself before striding into Class 2B, keeping her frayed temper under control. She flashes a grin that didn't meet her eyes at the students seated before her, eyes flicking to the clock for a moment. 9:13. She squashes the bad feeling in her chest, brandishing her whip at the class. Students. She brings the whip down with a crack. It is time for you to learn. You can't fall asleep when you're counting stars. Get it together. Your mind can't sleep when you let it starve. But now you want to see me fall. Oblivion, dirty palm. There are greater storms than these. Greater storms, greater trials. It will pass. It will pass. Where has Denki heard that before? The book? Probably, but he can't remember which. Or maybe he made it up one day, and pretending that he read it in a book is easier than admitting that he's so fucked up, he'd come up with something like that. He doesn't know. He doesn't know a lot of things, really, and he's okay with that. Kind of. A little bit. The cotton clogging his brain is starting to fade. He blinks, reaching out with his mind to regather his scattered senses. Where is he now? Recovery Girl's office? That's usually where people take him when he short-circuits, giggling all the way. He may be out of it when this happens, his mind blurs and words are lost on him. But he can still recognize laughter when he hears it. He can still recognize that this time, instead of being left cold and alone, he feels warm. Instead of abandoning him to recover on his own, someone has stayed with him, and that someone still has a hand in his hair. He feels scared, of course, and anxious, who wouldn't? But somehow, he feels safe too. Maybe it's the light pressure on his chest, warm and sparking with unnatural. That's not normal, is it? The sound of the soft crackle of electricity finally registers in his ears. Not Recovery Girl's office, then. Where is he? How did he even short-circuit in the first place? It comes back to him in fragments. Uraraka's shadow, the falling pallet coming down to crush him. I shouldn't be away from the group. The thought hits him without warning, jarring him from his memories. Where is everyone? They can't have gone far. They wouldn't just leave me. Right? Chew. His thoughts stop right in their tracks, and after much deliberation, Denki opens his eyes, reaching a still sluggish arm to rub at them. And as he sees the Pikachu, yes, the Pikachu, sitting on his chest, The haze lingering in his mind is blown away, leaving his thoughts crystal clear and oh my god, there's a Pikachu on me. His worry is forgotten in the moment, a childish sort of glee possessing him. Hand shaking, he reaches towards the creature, and it sniffs him for a second before butting its nose into his palm with a happy chirp of Pika. Denki is going to cry. Yep, look at that, actual tears are spilling down his cheeks because it's a Pikachu. He dressed up as one for Halloween for the first 10 or so years of his life. Hi, he says in his talking to a really cute cat voice, because what kind of monster would you be to not have a talking to a really cute cat voice? He releases a few sparks through his fingertips for the creature's amusement, and it happily sparks back at him. With the return of his senses, he finally notices the warm, yellow blanket wrapped around him and the audio playing in the background. After a few more seconds, even with most of his attention dedicated to the Pikachu, he recognizes it as an English audiobook, though something about it is strange. Maybe it's the accent, or the strange quiver on the O's. Wait one fucking goddamn second. It's the OWO extension. Someone is reading a book, an entire novel, in a meme format. Denki stifles a snort of laughter, afraid to startle the Pikachu. What's this? He murmurs, scratching the animal behind its ear. A few more seconds of listening grant him even more knowledge. First of all, that's Morgan Freeman, and second of all, he's reading a Hemingway novel. Hugh Hemingway. Denki covers his mouth to quiet his laughing fit. The Pikachu stands, seeming to perk its ears up before running off, and just like that, Denki is alone again, as he always is. The fear, the panic, the terror rises up in his throat, up and up until it chokes him. But just before he can sink into his anxiety, he hears the pattering of feet on the floor, and he finds himself buried beneath a mountain of affectionate Pokemon. He's in heaven, he's sure of it. Or wait, wasn't he in the Shadow Realm? Did he die? A voice sounds from behind him, and Denki shivers at how familiar it is. No, you're okay. Isn't that his voice? The hand that's been gently running through his hair. He should probably be more anxious about that, he realizes suddenly, tenses, clenching a handful of blonde fibers. The voice that is his, but not his, draws in a shaky breath. Thank God. That was too close. I barely made it in time. It takes him another second to realize, but he knows who this is now. Satu and his shadow had shared a voice as well, even if the shadows had been distorted. My shadow has me. My shadow has me. Don't freak out. I don't want to hurt you, and shadows can't lie, the shadow says, as if saying that will stop Denki from worrying. I was tailing your group from the beginning, but I didn't intervene until you needed me. Denki tries to speak, tries to force the words up and out of his throat, but all that he can manage is a confused groaning sound. Even so, his shadow seems to understand. They abandoned you, he whispers, his voice shaking with rage. They left you alone in a fight, too busy trying for glory to remember that protecting the helpless is half of their job. And what happened then? You nearly died. If I hadn't been there, you would have been crushed flat by Uraraka's shadow. I was the only one who did anything to save you. Denki ignores the pit in his stomach that is reminding him that these are all his thoughts. His mind, his insecurities. He tries to speak up, to say something, anything to defend his friends, but all that comes out is a dry rasp. Hold on. I'll get you some water and food, the shadow says, seeming to notice the state that Denki is in. He pats his head one last time before standing up and walking away, and Denki shudders. Aizawa-sensei had said that they'd be drawn to their shadows, and that pull is frighteningly real and tangible in his mind as his shadow leaves him. He returns barely a moment later, and Denki hears the familiar sizzle of a soda can being popped open. Then, a hand is slipped under his back, and he's being gently lifted to sit on the couch. The Pokemon laying on him scatter, then run back to sit in his lap when he's safely on the couch. He blinks before taking his first proper look at his shadow. It's like looking into a mirror. It should have registered by now, really, that his naturally yellow eyes mean that his shadow looks nearly indistinguishable from himself. The only differences in them are the bitter, angered look in his shadow's eyes and his disheveled, worn-out school uniform. Denki shakes at the sight. Drink, the shadow says, carefully sticking a plastic straw into the soda can that he'd opened. He presses the tip of the straw to Denki's lips, but Denki keeps his mouth firmly shut. The shadow frowns. It's just soda, I swear. You need to raise your blood sugar. And, that's true. After another moment's hesitation, he accepts the drink. Oh, that's his favorite brand of soda, isn't it? His shadow indeed. And there you go, the shadow says. That was easy, wasn't it? All it takes is a little bit of warmth and some sugar pumping through your veins, and suddenly the good old foggy hellscape of short-circuiting isn't so unbearable. And oh, Denki doesn't like where this is going at all. He averts his eyes. You'd think that maybe someone would notice that their friend is suffering, and that hey, maybe we can help him like we're supposed to. Instead of, laughing like a bunch of assholes. The shadow's whole body is shaking now, and he's just barely managing to not crush the soda can in his hand. Denki glares at his shadow, not daring to try speaking again. It's not their fault. The shadow still seems to understand, and of course he does. Not their fault, his shadow echoes as if the concept is foreign and new to him. Not their fault? They're in the hero course. This is half their damn job, to recognize when people need help, and what do? Laugh just like everyone else did. This is what we get for thinking UA would be different. Denki's gut clenches. Don't say it. I hate them. I hate them. Stop it. I hate them. Shut up. The shadow suddenly yelps, dropping the soda can. Electricity runs all along the surface of the metal as it clatters with a spark on the floor. He glares at Denki, but he returns the expression, spitting the straw out. The soda inside it had been a good enough conductor to make up for the plastic of the straw itself. Shit, the shadow mutters, slapping at a patch of skin on his hand that looks almost like cloth. Shit. Keep it together, Denki. There's an awful crunching noise as the shadow presses down on the strange skin, and when he lifts his hand back up, the cloth has returned to normal flesh. You know what? Whatever. Deny me all you want. We're gonna go see one of the other shadows soon, and then this won't be a problem anymore. Denki looks at his shadow with confusion, grabbing onto one of the Pikachu for support. I don't like it, but if it's to help you then I'll deal, the shadow says. I've never heard of anyone else making you their first priority, so it's up to me to fill the gap. What a selfish bunch of, the hell? The shadow's head snaps up, eyes wide. They came looking? The shock soon melts into a look of rage. Too late to play hero, assholes, he snarls, his voice echoing like two people are speaking instead of one. Denki's friends are here, that's the only explanation. They came for me. They care. They probably just want their comic relief back, his shadow mutters, and Denki tries to ignore the fact that his shadow is literally made of his own repressed thoughts and feelings. Stay here, I'll handle them. The shadow turns and heads for the door. What? Denki forces himself to his feet. But even with the fog rapidly fading, his sense of direction hasn't quite returned. He can't quite tell which way is up, and his vision is swimming badly from moving so quickly in this state. Still, he tries to follow after his shadow. He runs into the couch, then a desk, before he finally locates the door and pulls himself after his shadow. The fog fades even more as time passes. Stop, he yells, but his voice echoes helplessly through what he now recognizes as cold metal hallways. There are steel girders everywhere, and when he grabs hold they make moving without a sense of direction much easier. It's probably why they're here in the first place. Don't hurt, he starts, but whatever he means to follow that becomes garbled in his mouth. His hand slides off the guiding rail, and he struggles to find it again. His body is protesting even the smallest movement, but he pushes on. He doesn't know where his shadow is. He can't save his friends. He's so weak, so useless. Guess the circumstances really don't matter. I'm always the stupid burden in the end.